A young boy named Hogarth secretly befriends a robot from outer space, but it's not long before the government comes knocking. Set in the 1950s to evoke the pulpy atomic era of science fiction, The Iron Giant is one of the best animated films ever made. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a sci-fi movie. And on this week's show, it is our 250th episode, and the patrons voted between three of the bigger movies that we hadn't done yet, and the winner was The Iron Giant, and that's what we're doing today. So the rare occasion we're doing an animated film. In fact, off the top of my head, I don't know if we've done an animated film before this episode.
I'm not sure. I mean, I could easily scroll through and look, but that's 250 I'd have to look through. So yeah, let's just assume it's actually the first.
I think it might be the first. I think it might be the first. But hey, yeah, Iron Giant, 1999. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to the spoilers. If you are enjoying the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch. It helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can get some bonus shows every month from me and David over on Patreon. I'll tell you more about them at the end of the show, though. So, Iron Giant. An iron giant falls from space to the Earth, and a young boy named Hogarth finds him and befriends him, and there might also be an evil government man who's trying to ruin all the good vibes, the party. He wants to ruin it all with the military and general capitalism.
I mean, I would say anti-Red Scare stuff is the main push for that more than capitalism. But yeah, by the way, just a quick scroll through. I did end up finding Lightyear, episode 159.
There you go. Okay, so we've done one before. Very good. Very good. So yeah, we'll get into the movie in a bit. I don't know the answer to this. Have you seen this before, David?
I have seen this before. So I don't know if it's the same across the pond for you, but back in the early 2000s, on our side, Cartoon Network got the TV rights for this. And I cannot begin to fathom what was going on back in the executive room back then, but they decided that on like random days and holidays throughout the year, they would just not do any normal programming and would instead air Iron Giant for 24 hours on repeat. So for full days at a time, Iron Giant was just playing in my home as I wanted to watch Cartoon Network.
You know, I don't think any like channels here ever, I mean, maybe they've done it by now because I've not watched regular broadcast TV in like way over a decade at this point. But growing up, there was none of this, because I've heard American stations doing this with It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas or Christmas Story.
Christmas Story, yeah.
Yeah, but that is not a thing. I've never had a channel just displaying the exact same thing over and over again all day. Maybe a TV show, it's all different. I remember Cartoon Network doing Scooby-Doo marathons, but it was all different episodes throughout the day.
Yeah, and they still do that stuff. They still like show different shows and like franchises of movies, but it was so weird because they played, I remember the marketing for it was always like, we've got the rights to an all-time classic. And then I looked it up, I was like, this movie came out like 2 years ago. What?
Yeah, but now you're old, so now it's a classic.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I don't consider movies from the 90s or 80s classics. Or even
25 years old, Pete. 25 years old.
No, but even the 70s, I didn't really like, and that was, you know, a good bit of time before I was born. I feel like when I think of classic cinema, I'm thinking 60s and back, because to me, 70s is when it became kind of a bit more realistic, a bit more gritty, a bit more hard-hitting. That's not to say that I think movies from the 70s and movies from the 2010s feel the same. They do not. Things change significantly in those periods of time as well. But anywho, yeah, so we'll get into Iron Giant.
By the way, can I just say something absolutely incredible here? As it's slated, this review is going to go out on August 6th. That is actually the date that this movie released. August 6th, 1999. We are on exactly the 25th anniversary.
I didn't even realize it was the 25th anniversary this year. I wasn't thinking about it. It makes sense.
25th anniversary for episode 250. This is all coming together, Pete.
That was not intentional. That is the cosmic stars have aligned, and it's all come together. Let's pretend the Patreon vote never happened and this was all planned. This was just...
We did it, Pete. This was such a good idea that we had.
Yes, the intelligence, the genius, you might call it, is just beaming off the screens right now. All right, David. What'd you think of the Iron Giant?
I think that this movie is one of the pinnacles of American animation. I absolutely adore this movie. I think that the first part of it can get a little bit of like, you know, oh, you know, it's a bit cartoonish, a boy and his robot, whatever like that. But by the time you hit the back half an hour, back 45 minutes of this movie, there's a tone shift to it and a seriousness to it that like just elevates it to something that I knew what was coming as I was watching it, and I still felt my heart just want to be ripped out of my chest because of how much emotion and how much seriousness they put into what ostensibly other people would just say is like, oh yeah, it's just another kids movie. Like, it's just another, the only other stuff this studio done beforehand is like Space Jam. Like, no, this is something they went in, they had a vision for it, and I think that it is a story that stands the test of time. I get why they said back then that it was a classic, because it feels like it. So it's all right.
Yeah, I love the Iron Giant. I think I liked it back then, and I gained more of an appreciation for it as I saw it through the years. And I'm not someone who's typically drawn to that much animation. There's some that I like. There's some that stand out, and I hold a special place for. But this might be at the top of that list, and I think the themes, the message that it has by the end, there's a couple of key things that it's saying by the time you get to the very end, I think really stand out. They hold up. They're perfect for its setting of the Cold War. You know, it's like, I think it's the 1950s we're in this story. That all works really well. And then the fact that Brad Bird, the director here, who between this and a couple of other things, although to be honest, I think this is his best work, but he also made the best Mission Impossible movie. Now, we'll see if we agree on that when we do the Mission Impossible franchise. Presumably next year, because the 8th one's meant to be next summer, but they've already pushed it back once, so I don't want to make any complete assumptions on that. But regardless, like I think he's very talented, and I think the stuff that he makes that feels especially Brad Bird, I'm describing this, I'm thinking a little bit The Incredibles, but I'm definitely thinking a vastly underrated movie called Tomorrowland.
Right.
All right. He brings this sense of wonder that always feels like it has. There was a time in my life where I was campaigning for Brad Bird to direct Superman. Like, I wanted it with every fiber of my being. Now, there's some really obvious reasons for that in this movie, but I think the handling of the material, not just because it makes some references to Superman, I think the actual way it's handled, the way it handles the relationship with the robot, the idea of us making our choices about who we are and who we're going to be, how others are going to look at you, how other people might oppose that. There's just a lot of things here that just lent itself to that. And I think there's a sense of, I hate to use the word magic, because typically when something is described as magical or whimsical, I don't really like it. Not that I would describe this as whimsical per se, but it's not far off of it, right? The sense of wonder, the sense of awe, as you know, as the boy looks up at the giant, and this sense of like, oh, this is something larger than life. But fundamentally, this is a story that you could compare to a lot of other things that don't necessarily have a giant robot. You could compare this a little bit to How to Train Your Dragon. You could compare this a little bit to basically anything where a main character, usually a kid, befriends something that everyone else will not instantly accept and appreciate, right? They'll be scared of it, whether it be a dragon, a robot, an alien, a monster, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And a big part of that message is always going to be that people haven't given it a chance, and they're prejudiced, they just make assumptions and act out of fear. So that's one big theme of it. Obviously, the other big theme is about making choices about who you're going to be. All that stuff comes together. It's beautiful. And when it gets to the end, I can't help but get a little teary at a couple of key moments. Where it works. It's firing in all cylinders, and it feels like the message. And if anything, the more I've grown up and the more, I don't know, disillusioned,
cynical, jaded.
Yes, the more disillusioned I've become with how the world is. It's the kind of thing where I find it more uplifting to see a story that's actually promoting some ideals that I would like to see more of in the world. And something like this does that. And it's like, yeah, a bit of hope's been restored. It's nice.
Yeah. That's what I think a lot of these, I know you're just saying that it's not whimsical, but like that style of movie, and especially with this sort of kid with the thing, whatever that may be, stories get told, is that you have the kid and whatever, that relationship should be fine, should be whatever. But the opposite side, the world that is opposing it, usually is played as like a cartoonishly bad sort of thing. Like everyone is so resistant against it because it's this cartoonishly evil thing. To go to like How to Train Your Dragon stuff, I think they did a pretty good job at like breaking down exactly why these people are afraid of dragons and why it's not a good thing. But at the same time, it is very over the top. It's very like bombastic in how much it is. I love this movie and how realistic and reserved it's playing it. It's realistic in that during the time setting, like there was this massive amount of paranoia of the unknown, of the other, of foreign powers and such like that. And they use that setting as the backdrop to a little insular tale of saying like what happens when all of that paranoia gets focused in just this one singular being, and how do we respond to that? And it's beautiful the way they do it. I think that this story, despite the fact that it is animation, despite the fact that ostensibly it is for children, it doesn't talk down to them. It's spelling everything out. There's so much stuff in here that as a kid, I remember went straight over my head in terms of like the character of Kent Mansley, the government agent, in terms of like how these different adult characters are reacting to the giant. It's very much looking back on it now, there's different levels to it that can be picked apart, and it makes it that much more interesting to go through over and over again throughout the years.
It's why it's not tedious to watch as an adult. Like, there's so many animated movies that I think once you grow up and you try watching them, they're not bad, but they're so simplistic because they don't want you add it. Like, you know, like it has those extra themes and layers that let us sit here and talk about what it's saying, despite the fact it's an animated movie. And on the animation itself, I think it's a gorgeous movie. It's an animation style which, like, I don't even know how, I guess Western 2D animation, which feels like a dead art at this point, because I know Disney have brought it back for a couple of things, but for the most part, things switch to CG, and I feel like almost anything I see in 2D animated is at least a little bit anime now, right? Because even some of the DC animated movies that I kind of like, there's a little bit of an anime kind of style to them. It's actually why I'm quite looking forward to that new Batman animated series, which looks kind of like the old school animated show, because that style seems to be gone, but there is something kind of nice about it. It's got the I know there's like, you know, at some points Hogarth's mom does kind of have a little bit of that sort of Disney attitude on her face when she's sort of making a face at like someone when they say something kind of mean or or whatever, you know, that sort of thing where she sort of bites her lip and the eyes go wide, like, piss off, son of a bitch, until you dare come after my son. Like, there's a little bit of that look in her face. Like, I feel like that, and obviously all the bigger stuff with, like, the silhouette of the Iron Giant and the way it sort of handles the light in the dark and all the rest of it. You know, all that stuff's great. Right now, this is only, as far as I know, it's only in HD. Obviously, there'll be a 4K HDR version at some point, and I'm actually really excited about them eventually doing that, because I'm sure it'll look great when it happens. That said, though, I mean, even right now, it looks great, and it holds up really well as a visual piece. So, you know, that stuff's great. And then also, honest, the sound mix is actually, for an animated movie, is very aggressive. Like the stomping footsteps, like anytime there's like an explosion or something like that this thing was rumbling. You know, so it really was adding to the immersion of everything, watching it this way. So, yeah, I can't fault the technical presentation at all.
Yeah, and also I think that this was one of the first movies that did a integrated CGI character along with the hand-drawn animation, because the giant himself for most of the movie is CGI, but he's done in the way that it makes it look like he's a cel-shaded character. It's the
same, at least I think, going from my eye. Right at the very start of the movie, there's a couple of shots of like a boat on the water, and I'm pretty sure the water well, not maybe completely CG. I think it has like a CG like backbone because there's actually depth to it, and I'm like, well, you didn't draw that depth. It just, you know, it's moving in a way that feels like it's a 3-dimensional model that's got the sort of 2-dimensional water drawn over it, and I thought that added a really great bit of depth. So yeah, I'm not against a little bit of using some CG to add some depth to 2D animation. I mean, it's not the first time it's happened, because the first time it happened is actually a very famous example of my favorite Disney animated movie, and that is from 1987, right? Before Terminator 2, even before The Abyss, and that is Basil the Great Mouse Detective. The big climax of that movie when they're fighting in the gears of the Big Ben, the big clock tower. Those gears were CG in a very similar way that some of this movie's got some little integrated bits of CG. Well, I say little, the big thing. But I was going to say,
quite literally, the giant thing.
But, you know, in terms of the whole movie, it's a relatively small part overall, because there's a lot of regular people, there's a lot of regular backgrounds and things like that.
Yeah, I think the distinction I read was that it is a character rather than just settings or, you know, like you were saying, the cogs and gears and stuff in the thing. I think this is the first time there was a full-fledged character who was CGI'd like that. But I think the more impressive part here is that looking at it, it doesn't stand out. Like if you look at any given frame from this movie, you can't tell that he isn't hand-drawn in there. So I don't know what kind of magic they pulled off in order to make him blend in so well when CGI was still kind of in its infancy, but damn, they made that deal with the devil for a very good reason.
Well, I think you can tell in a way, right? But not in a bad way. Like the way it moves and the way there's depth to its movement as it's walking towards the camera, say, I think that gives it away that it's more than just 2D animation, but it never like visually betrays the 2D animation. It always feels like it belongs there. So it's very impressive. Like they knew how to do it, and I think the fact that there's like some video games these days that have like 2D cell shaded kind of styles in a 3D game, and it can look pretty good. It's a testament to say, hey, it actually is pretty possible to do that and make it work in the context of what it's doing, because it also lets you do things that you can't really do in 2D animation, like there's certain like camera moves you can't do in 2D animation because there's no way to animate the actual feeling of like moving through a space, right? You just can't do it. You have to sort of treat it as more like, mostly you can pan left and right because you can have a wider bit of art that you can go left and right on. You can do all these things, but you can't emulate like a POV shot going through somewhere, at least not in a way that would match the rest of the animation. But if you're using like CG as, even if it's just like the backbones of it, and you're doing the camera move through the CG, if you then put on the textures, almost like a video game, you put the 2-dimensional textures on top of the CG walls, then all of a sudden you've got a 3D space that you can move through with your digital camera, your virtual camera, I mean to say, not digital camera. But yeah, so all that stuff is good. Yeah. Really impressive.
And I mean, also just looking at I know we already said Brad Bird as a director, you know, he does a good job with the Wonder and whatnot, but this was his first feature, period.
Yeah, he did.
And that is incredible.
He did a couple of Simpsons episodes, like a special as well, something like that. But this was his coming out party, and then he did Incredibles and Ratatouille. So he sort of stayed in that animation realm. And then I remember going to see Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol and just sort of going and kind of like, I'll just go, I'm free, I'll go and see it. And I liked 1 and 3 well enough, but I wasn't like super pumped for it. And then came out of it going, that was great. Why was that so much better than the others? And then like, oh, it's directed by Brad Bird, who did Iron Giant. Okay, that's a weird like pull. And it's made me want him to do more live action. And obviously he did Tomorrowland, which I actually really liked, despite the reviews being quite middling. And then, but from there, you know, he's got a couple of projects upcoming. He's got like an earthquake movie from 1906, and then there's another one. I don't know how far along either of those projects are. I don't know if they're kind of sitting in development hell, or if they're actually like one's close to really becoming a thing, but I hope they do. I hope more of his projects come through.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and he puts out one about every like 4 to 5 years, so the fact that we've got 2 things in development for him right now does say that that's probably this decade taken care of. I doubt we're going to get anything else.
Yeah, because he did do Incredibles 2 as well, I believe. I don't know if he directed that, but he was definitely involved with it.
No, he directed that,
He directed that as well? Okay. I actually still haven't seen Incredibles 2, for whatever reason.
It's fine. It's all right. It doesn't. I don't think it quite hits the heights of Incredibles 1, but it does its own thing.
We need a sequel. Go make a sequel. Don't really have an idea for one. Well, just go do it anyway.
Pretty much.
So we should talk about the cast a little bit.
Yes.
Not that I have anything to really say about the actor who plays Hogarth, because I've never heard of him from anything else.
Let me look him up here. Eli Marienthal. Yeah, no, he did not. He did apparently a bunch of the American Pie movies for a while, and it looks like he's just a voice actor.
Now that you've said that, is he Stifler's little brother?
He is.
Yeah, okay. As soon as you said that, I looked at his face again. I went, "Oh, I think that's Stifler's little brother."
Yep, there you go. No, but beyond that, his only other thing was that he apparently in the DC animated universe, he was not Tim Drake, whatever the Robin was. No, it was Tim Drake. Yeah, Tim Drake Robin. Okay. Across the DCAU. But beyond that, that's honest to God, he hasn't done anything big since 2004. I think he's basically out.
Well, I wonder if that's just when he was going to college and stuff. Maybe he just went down a different career path, and it's like the acting got left behind.
Well, he did do 12 episodes of a series in 2017. I don't know if that's voice acting or physical acting. It looks like it's physical, but I don't know anything else beyond that.
Okay. Star power wise, we got Jennifer Aniston as Hogarth's mum. Notably, this was when Friends was still airing, so she was actually pretty huge at the time.
Oh yeah.
So you know that's notable, and you can hear it if you're listening for her. You can hear it's her.
Yeah. As soon as she started talking, I'm like, I know that voice, and I did have to look it up, but it was definitely a recognizable.
Well, that's the
voice.
one that everyone like knows is in this because she's kind of like billed. I mean, I don't know if she's billed per se, but people just know she's the mum, right? The one that I always forget, but as soon as I hear him speaking, and it clicks, is the government guy, Kent Mansley, right?
Oh yeah.
As soon as he starts speaking, I'm like, that's Shooter McGavin.
Yeah.
Like that's as soon as he starts speaking, I'm like, yeah, and I always double check, and I'm like, yep, Christopher McDonald, it's him. I can hear it clear as day. He is perfect for that character.
It was so weird when he walked up to Hogarth, pissed off, and said, "I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast."
Honestly, there's a certain point in this movie where it wouldn't have been out of place for him to say that.
Oh, absolutely.
there's a montage at one point where he's just like the joke is that he keeps calling him a nickname every time he talks to him. It's like, hey Sport, hey Scout, hey whatever Tiger, so and so on. He's perfect for that role. No one knew who he was at the time, but Vin Diesel voices the Iron Giant.
No, seriously, he was only in Saving Private Ryan before this.
And that was a minor role as well.
Yeah, he was like more background. But yeah, then he just went on to do this. And honest to God, looking at it back now, as I hear the Giant's speech get more defined over the course of the movie, I hear Groot a lot more. Like it's only now in hindsight, obviously not as I was seeing Groot, but like I hear it. It's definitely there.
Yeah, okay. And then another character we should mention, kind of like the sort of the local well, not a mechanic. He runs a scrap yard, so I don't know if that counts as a mechanic.
He's the beatnik. He's the cool guy.
Yeah, he's Dean, played by Harry Connick Jr., who I don't think I really know from much else either, unless I've just.
He's got a very familiar name, but I couldn't tell you. He was apparently in Independence Day. He was a captain in that, but then beyond that, I think he might only just be known from like music stuff, because I see he also has music videos here. I mean,
I've seen Copycat and a couple other things, but nothing where I'm remembering him from. Certainly. So
the name is definitely familiar, though. I couldn't tell you why. Harry Connick Jr. just sticks out in my head as a name I know.
Yeah, a couple of other voices that are noteworthy here. I recognized one of the old men's voices at one point, and it did turn out to be someone familiar. It was M. Emmett Walsh, who you might know from Blade Runner or Blood Simple or a bunch of other things. And the other one, which was also a sitcom that was airing when this came out, from Frasier, we've got Frasier's dad, John Mahoney, playing the general who what's his name? Kent keeps calling in. So. There's a few recognizable voices here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much everybody except for Hogarth, Giant, and I'm gonna say Dean, probably Kent as well. But like the mom character, the general character, they're much more B, C tier in terms of how much screen time they get. They're not really around that long. So
I can imagine them. They come in for like maybe 4 hours of recording, and all the dialogue gets done, and that's it. Off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how they got Aniston. They were like, "Oh, you're filming Friends every day this week. All right, just stop in like on your lunch or whatever. We'll get done."
Yeah, I'm probably squishing it into a bit too much, but yeah, I can't imagine that a lot of those actors spent more than a couple of days in a sound booth for the part in this. Vin Diesel probably even less, unless they were trying to nail down what the voice was, so he had to do it a million different ways until they said, "Oh, that's what we wanted to sound like." Yeah, that sounds good.
I also, obviously, Vin Diesel has a lot of post-processing on his as well to give it more like a mechanical grind. But yeah, it probably was just walking through a bunch of different possibilities that then they fed into some post-processing machine parts.
Yeah, that's fun. Plus, you always get on the animated movies just a bunch of people listed as additional voices. So they're just...
Yeah,
all the red shirts, all the extras, it's the same few people just doing all those voices.
Roger Bumpass. Why do I know that name? Oh, he plays Squidward on SpongeBob. Okay. I couldn't tell you who he was in this movie. I didn't hear Squidward at any point, but...
Well, I think Squidward's a specific voice that he puts on. I don't think that's just his normal voice.
I would hate to live if my voice sounded like Squidward, just trying to place like an order on the phone or something. Just be like, wait a minute, hold on. Could you say welcome to the Krusty Krab?
All right. Spoilers then? Are we ready for spoilers? Anything you want to talk about?
Nah, can't really say. I will say there is a good musical backing track to this. There's a really good score going on for it. But I gotta say, except for the opening little sequence of Hogarth going through town where it's very light and peppy, and then the very ending sequence where it's very... to say the mood would be to spoil it. So beyond those two, I didn't really notice the score in the middle of the movie that much, but those ones really stood out to me as like big iconic moments.
I did notice it a few times. I will say it is a Warner Brothers movie. I do feel that there's one moment where they should have let a few notes of the Superman theme in, and they didn't. They had like a little substitute, and I was like, do you know what? You should have just done it. You should just had a little dee 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 dee. Just that. That's all you needed. Just that.
Yeah.
But you're Warner Brothers. You could have just done it. You own it. It's fine.
I mean, if we're talking about how Warner Brothers treated this movie, though, real quick, it was a financial failure, but everyone basically points the finger to the fact that Warner Brothers did absolutely no marketing for this movie at all. They just kind of threw it out in theaters. I think they gave it like 1 or 2 months of promotional like teaser trailers and stuff, but they didn't have any faith in this whatsoever.
Yeah. It's amazing how many studios or how many movie studios of just had no faith in that end up being something that is special. And maybe not so much this one, because I wouldn't say this one's been milked in quite the some way. I mean, Iron Giant's popped up a few times, and Ready Player One being the main example. But I feel like there's definitely movies in the past where the studio just has no faith in, say, like the first movie and what ended up being like a 10-movie franchise. And it's like, yeah, it's almost like you guys sometimes are idiots and don't know what you're talking about, and you gave no faith to say, I don't know, I'm sure there's probably tons of examples you could pick from the 80s where the studio had no faith in the Terminator, they had no faith in a Back to the Future. I mean, maybe that's that, well, not that one because Spielberg produced that, but like there's a bunch of examples from that time period where there was no faith. And then, oh shit, years later, they're milking it by selling merch, and they're milking it by trying to make sequels. And it's like, this became your cash cow. And it had to do it on a very small budget because you didn't trust that it would ever actually amount to anything. So
it always strikes me whenever a studio exec, whenever I hear a story of them saying like, oh, I always believed in this, or oh, I admit I didn't fully put in behind this. All I can imagine is like the stock market brokers who like guarantee you returns on your money from what is essentially just a random number generator. It's like, yeah, no, clearly you know what all the secrets are. You figured it all out. And these execs are like, yeah, no, we know what makes a good movie. And then you look at like Sony's backlog and you're like, do you though? Do you though?
Yep, time and time again. Which is not to say that I think there's people who even know better. I just don't think movie executives happen to be any more wise as to what works than anyone else is. I think they just happen to be in that position, so there's this assumption that they should have a better idea of what's going to work. But I don't think they do. I think there's enough happy accidents and enough just absolute... They've put all the money behind something into a complete colossal failure. So... Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Anywho, spoilers for The Iron Giant. You have been warned. The movie
Yes.
begins with what looks like a meteor coming down through space and into the Earth's atmosphere, and you know, presumably into the water, because the first glimpse we get of the Iron Giant in all silhouette is when a small fishing boat, the sailor looks out and, you know, doesn't quite see him, but then the lightning flashes and you get, well, actually he sees what he thinks is the lighthouse, and then the Iron Giant's head turns and you get two lights and he's like, and then obviously you get the big silhouette with the lightning behind him, and it's all very beautiful.
It's such a menacing opening to the giant as well, because he immediately like goes for the boat and starts like chomping down on it. It's such a great idea of setting this up to be a villainous character, setting this up to be like your standard, because there are multiple allusions through this movie of the time, like 50s sort of, it came from outer space sort of stories, like those late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, Hogarth watches sci-fi movies and horror movies in his downtime. The show is that.
And it does a great job of setting that up here in the beginning of like, okay, something came from space, it's huge, and it destroyed this boat. And they play it up that way. They play it up as a side, like essentially just following it beat for beat of how it would in that sort of story of like, I saw it, it was huge. I
mean, that's actually, I mean, not seeing this at the start, you don't see this at the start, but this actually mirrors a lot of the opening beats of the original Godzilla, which is a boat's been destroyed. Some people say they saw something big. You know, like there's a lot of mirroring of that progression. Obviously, things change quite quickly as the movie goes on, but yeah, that's all fine. And we're introduced to Hogarth, who's this kid riding through his bike. We're in Maine, so shocking to find out that Stephen King had nothing to do with this movie, because everything set in Maine usually comes from him, but here we are.
There's so many shots in this movie of like people reading newspapers, and the headlines are always something about like, you know, the Sputnik, which is mentioned in this movie, is just being launched. But I was kind of, ever since it said that it was set in Maine, always looking for the little sub like heading, the subtitle of like local kids go missing in Derry sort of thing. And it's like, nah, never. We're not linking that together here. Maine is just its own thing in this universe.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure this idea of what Maine is probably shared with what Stephen King thinks of Maine, and that's why Maine's been picked, because you get all these little towns. At least that's what all these movies and books and stuff have taught me, is that Maine's full of these little small towns.
Yeah, no, from New York up to the border of Maine, it's just massive metropolises. But the moment you cross the state line, you see 14 cows and like 3 buildings.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. So we get introduced to him. We get introduced to his mum, who's working at the diner. She's a hard-working single mum, right? She tells Hogarth, who's found a squirrel that he likes, and he's got in a box, and she's like, he doesn't even have to say what it is. He says, Mom, you won't believe what I found. And she's like, we're not keeping a pet. So clearly this is something he does. He's done this before. The
mom brings up, remember the raccoon? I remember the
raccoon. But he agrees to put it away or get rid of it or whatever. But it's escaped. It's made a beeline under the table. So we get a whole comedy sequence of him trying to find it. And then he encounters Dean, who's fallen asleep at one of the diner booths. But when he wakes up, he talks to the kid a bit, but the squirrel goes up his leg, which leads to, I mean, a couple of fun bits. I mean, obviously the main thing that I like here from a filmmaking point of view is the long quote-unquote shot of the camera, again, you know, air quotations, the camera following like all the different people in the diner, like screaming and putting up their feet because obviously the squirrels ran past them, and it eventually comes almost like 360 degrees to landing on Hogarth's mum, and just the way she turns and looks with that scorn in her eye, like, I know what this is your fault, you did this, is perfect.
Absolutely. I also like right before that, the sequences, we get that old man that was out on the boat who's just recounting the story to a couple other people. He's saying, like, I saw it, it was huge, it was a giant man, it's an alien, maybe it's a Sputnik, something like that. And everyone's just making fun of him. They're basically saying he's a drunk, he can't be trusted. And that's where Dean pipes in, and he's like, hey, I saw it too. And they start making fun of him as well, but at the very least it shows Dean is a good guy right off the bat. Yeah, like, I mean, we know he didn't see this, but he's able to back this guy up and doesn't want him to be humiliated.
Yeah, he even says, like, someone's got to stick up for the cooks. That's what he says to Hogarth when he turns back around. Yeah, this scene does a good job of establishing 3 of our main characters here, right? It establishes that Hogarth cares for well, animals in this case, but that's obviously going to extend to him caring about the Iron Giant.
He's empathetic in a general sense, yeah.
Right? The mum's hardworking, single, and puts up with all of his shit, even though she has a right to maybe stop him from doing some of it. And then, like you say, Dean comes across as, like, he's sticking up for the crazy old man, even though he doesn't actually believe what he's saying. He's just not wanting him to be made fun of. There's no reason to belittle him, so, you know, give him a chance. So, yeah, it gives you a reason to like Dean, even though he's trying to act cool. And he although, I will say, the joke that happens at the end of the squirrel scene is actually... I mean, it's not super adult, but like the visual of him standing up when the squirrel's inside his trousers saying, "Hey, everyone, I'm going to apologize for this in advance." And obviously we just stay from behind the whole time, but you hear him unzip his pants, and then the squirrel comes flying out, and you see the squirrel scatter across the floor. And I'm like, I'm just imagining like how much of like a different movie rating this would have if the camera was on the other side and we saw the squirrel just unleash from his crotch. Yeah, I mean, I get it for the comedy beat, but it is a bit weird the whole way that the squirrel is handled, because it's like he couldn't have just unzipped his pants down at the table. He had to make a big showing of it. He had to stand up in front of everybody, like, "Excuse me, everybody!" Zip. Yeah, but you know, it's all good fun, right? There's a sense of chaos to the scene in a fun way, where it's all kind of controlled, and it's like, okay, this kid kind of brings chaos with him, but it's all very wholesome chaos. He's not, you know, he's doing something for a decent reason, which is why his mum can't hate him for it. She's pissed at him, but she can't hate him for it because ultimately he's been a good person. So there's a nice quality to it.
It wasn't like he walked in and just like opened up the box and said, "Be free, squirrel, terrorize these people." Like he did it because he wanted a pet squirrel, and who doesn't?
Yeah. I mean, I've never thought about it, to be honest.
I mean, me neither, but I'm sure at some point in my history I looked at a squirrel and I was like, I want to take that home with me.
Does a squirrel make a good pet?
No.
I would have thought so.
Absolutely not, nah.
Unless they bring you nuts. They bring you nuts.
Yeah. No, I'm sure they don't just keep them all for themselves, those selfish bastards.
Yeah. But he's told that she's going to be home late, so... well, that's actually on the phone, I think, when he goes home, now I'm thinking about it. But either way, he goes home. He's told that he's not allowed to stay up late. There's some chicken in the fridge. You should have that for dinner. And then he opens his little bread bin and he's like, I'm way ahead of you, Mum. And there's just like a packet of Twinkies. Yeah, which...
The 3 rules she lays down is in bed by 8, no junk food, and don't watch any scary movies. And he's like, hey,
smash
it's
cut.
Me we're talking about.
Yeah, smash cut. Yeah, that's the other thing that makes him likable, actually. He's like, it's me we're talking about. Remember? He says it in such a sort of cool, casual way. Smash cut to him watching a sci-fi horror movie at 9 p.m. as he not only eats a Twinkie, he's like poked a hole in it, and he puts like cream inside, like the can of cream, and he squishes more cream into it so that the cream starts to overflow the Twinkie. And all I could think was, why have I never tried that? That looks incredible. That's just genius.
Apparently, according to trivia, that's something that Brad Bird did as a child. So
right, okay.
He pulled that right out of his own history.
Okay. Admittedly, the cream inside a Twinkie and the cream you get from a can of the squishy cream do not taste similar, so maybe a bit of a weird concoction, honestly. But
it was probably the same back in the 50s.
Maybe it was. Yeah. But he's watching his movie, which I think what I really appreciate about this fake movie on the TV is they did like very intentionally the voice acting for the characters in the movie. The way the man in particular talks, very still. He's like, "Oh, I left my keys in my laboratory. I will go get them." And it sounded like bad acting, but it was very intentional, and I really liked that, because you don't have, you know, if this was like a regular live action movie and we're watching a bad movie that was fake, this is what you do with it. You'd have the actors ham it up, but with this, you only have the voice to do that with. So he really nailed the, all right, I have to be stilted, I have to talk like I'm in an old-timey movie where, you know, I'm taking the dame home and we're going to have sex, but we can't talk about having sex because the Hays Code. Although it works out for this case because it's maybe like a PG for kids, but you know.
I appreciate it because it's, like you said, it's the bad acting, but it feels so natural the way that it's in this bad movie where it's like, he's like, "Oh no, the brain has fallen on the floor. Ah, well, you shouldn't be here anyway. How about a nightcap?" And they just like leads the woman out. Like it feels like the level of schlockiness that you get the vibe that Hogarth shouldn't be watching it, but obviously there's nothing actually inherently bad with it.
No.
It just like implies it from what little we see.
I mean, that's the thing. Pretty much any movie from before 1960, you could safely show a kid and it'd be fine.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing traumatizing in them. I'm sure people at the time thought there was. I'm sure people at the time were, no, you can't watch Dracula. You're too young for that. But, it's nothing.
My great-great-grandfather went to go see Train Approaching the Station. Never was the same after that.
Nice topical reference.
Yes, thank you.
It's not only 130 years, give or take, out of whack.
The classics never get old.
That's about it, because that was like 1890-ish, or maybe just a little bit after that, what I say. Yeah.
I have no idea.
130 years, give or take. Well, that's why they were freaked out. They'd never seen a moving image before.
Right, exactly.
So, no, I really love the classic movie thing. Obviously, what happens here is that because the Iron Giant has seemingly went past the house because there's some rumbles, and he's maybe knocked the aerial or something, the TV signal cuts out.
Yeah, Hogarth implies that he just ate it. He just chomped it right off the roof of the building.
Well, I think that's obvious later when we see that he's eating metal, right? Because, I guess we saw it with the boat, but I mean, it's just more, conclusive once we see him eating more stuff.
Right.
That's just what he does. He feeds on metal. But I just love again, it's very Godzilla where he looks out the window and there's just like a broken fence and like a lot of trail on the ground for where something has been walking, something has went through. And Hogarth's response to this is to grab his BB gun and put on his hat and be like, all right, it's hunting season.
We get the full Predator suit-up sequence. We got him like taping the flashlight to the thing. He puts on this like military helmet thing. It's a full sequence of gearing up.
Yeah, he's got like goggles he puts on. Yeah, and he goes hunting. He goes hunting for what this thing is. And our first big encounter is at the power station. But I will say, even some of these shots of like just going through the forest, like that's kind of a cool, creepy vibe. The big, the trees were all kind of like super dark shaded in the way they were colored for the movie. And you get that great moment where like the Iron Giant's head is in silhouette with the trees, right? I think that's around here.
Yeah, you can. He's come up to the electrical plant, whatever it is, and there's nothing going on there, but you see him like looking around at it, seeing if he can see anything. And in the background, you see the pointed tree, and then a dome shape.
Yeah.
And then ever so slowly, the Iron Giant's head just turns around. You see the two eyes again, and it's such a good reveal.
It's effective, and it is almost like a horror movie for a little minute, just just to give that sort of sense of danger. So the Iron Giant starts chomping on like the power cables, or specifically the thing that holds them up. The sort of the structure.
The pylons, I think they're called.
But he gets tangled in the power cable. So Hogarth obviously runs for it. He gets scared because this big giant, 100-foot tall metal man's there. But he realizes as he's running that the Iron Giant is caught in these power cables and he's in trouble. He's struggling. Like he's actually in danger. So Hogarth makes the choice, again showing that he is inherently good and empathetic. He runs back, and conveniently this power plant has a big switch that just says on and off. Obviously it's simplified because it's an animated movie. It's fine. But
that was one of the things where as he was running back over, I remembered the off switch, and I was like, I'm pretty sure you're going to need at least a key to access that kid. I don't think it's that simple, but all right.
Yeah, because like anyone just sauntering through could turn it off for a laugh. Like, I'll cut the town's power just for my lols.
Yeah, I don't want to have to take the quiz in school. I'm just going to that morning go in. All right, bye.
Yeah, it's like a step up from ringing the fire alarm. You just go to the power plant and just turn off all the power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy peasy. But yeah, it works though, and ultimately goes for, and it's around here with the mum's coming back home and like, wait, where is he? Where is he? So she actually goes looking for him, and she sees evidence that he's left the house, and finds him out here in the forest near where the power plant is, and he starts rambling on about a 100-foot alien robot, and she's just like, Hogarth, I'm not in the mood, and she gets stern enough to suggest, I've had a long day, you've effectively put yourself in danger by being out alone at night. I was worried about you. Now is not the time for your silly stories.
That's the thing. I don't think that it implies that like she's not willing to hear his crazy stories because like a long day at work or anything. It's much more the idea of like, you went missing, something could have happened to you.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
It didn't end. Like, no matter what you try to tell me right now, my adrenaline and fear that were pumping in me before are still there, and I just don't have the energy to deal with this. And she just, like, basically shuts them up as they drive away.
Yes, but we hear the next morning that the drunk sailor who was rambling on about seeing something has called the government and claims they're sending a man. So that's something that we've got to look forward to. And this is also... Yeah, I want to go.
Yeah, we just get one little interstitial here of all of Hogarth's like classmates or whatever are talking about the rumors going around about the man or whatever, and they're all just like, "Oh, I heard it was an alien. I think it's from the Russians. I think this, whatever." And he turns around, and he's like, "No, no, no. You all got it wrong. It's a 50-foot metal man." And they're like, "What? Why are you so sure about that, kid? Like, who cares what you have to say?" And I love this sequence not only because it shows that Hogarth is unable to get the Iron Giant out of his mind, like he's drawing pictures of it, but simultaneously it sets up so much for the end of the movie because they're watching a Cold War era thing of like what to do when an atomic bomb is approaching your town. Yeah, well, and it's so good.
It's good for setting up for the end, but it's also like such a vibe thing as well. It's like, okay, that really puts us in the time and place of the 50s and time and place of the Cold War, and also the cartoon. Well, maybe it's not a cartoon to them, but like because it's all an animated movie, it looked like a cartoon to me.
I mean, there's a character of like a beaver wearing a hat. It's probably a cartoon.
But, you know, we see this, oh yeah, duck and cover under the desk. And what they show in the cartoon is that there's like a big crater, but for some reason there's just a single pillar of dirt with this kid safe under his desk. And I'm like, no, that kid's dead too. This cartoon's just lying to them. Get under your desk. It's a nuke.
They show it there because it's this idea of like, oh no, see, you can survive a nuclear thing, only for that to come back in the end. And it's just like, no, you can't, you freaking idiots. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the other thing we get as well is that one of the old guys is selling his truck because he found a big bite out of it. And I love Dean sort of looks at it, he's like, you know, I'd pay you more for this scrap, but there's a big and he looks for a different word. Like he tries for like 10 seconds to think of a word that makes more sense, and he eventually just has to admit it and go, that's a bite. It looks like a big bite.
He's like, yes, well, I'm selling it because there is a big bite.
So
like, I wouldn't be selling it if it was in good condition, you freaking idiot.
Yes. All very good. So, you know, the next real section then is Hogarth actually sort of making proper contact with the Iron Giant, looking for him, bringing some metal to try and lure him out, because, hey, I've got some metal for you, some nice, delicious food, all that stuff. And he gets scared again. I mean, there's a whole montage where he's, like, waiting for him to come out, and he falls asleep, and then when he wakes up, the Iron Giant's, like, standing behind him, so he's a little bit freaked out.
I love it because so much of this movie shows how just mechanical and more importantly loud the Iron Giant is. With every step, it's this huge thud. Every time he moves any part of his body, you hear the mechanical whirring. But then somehow also at the same time, he's able to do these things like drop this tiny piece of metal that he was using as bait next to Hogarth, and then just be standing there right behind him, and Hogarth had no idea. And he does that at several points in this movie of just like being able to sneak around.
Yeah, well, he's got a stealth mode. That's all I can say.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, also, Hogarth's a heavy sleeper. That's what I'm...
Yes, that much is true.
That's my logic.
So, yeah, the robot shows up, and obviously he's, like, scared out of his mind. He goes running for it. He actually ends up, like, getting his face hit, and we see some blood coming out of his nose. And that's where, you know, the robot comes and just kneels down next to him and is obviously not a threat to him. He's happy that Hogarth helped him out of the power plant situation before by taking the power switch from the plant and dropping it in front of him as like the identifier of like, I know you did this. Thank you.
Yeah. So he tries to make contact. He tries to talk to him, and the Iron Giant cannot speak, at least not yet, but he can make sounds. So he starts trying to teach him some words, and he's like, this is a rock, and he picks up a huge rock. He's like, rock, like, and then he picks up a tree, rock. No, that's a tree. That's a tree. So
I think Arrival has kind of ruined my appreciation of these scenes, of just like how hard it is to teach someone who knows absolutely nothing of English the English language, where it's like, yeah, okay, you show him rock or whatever, but you got to start with the verbs first, the prepositional stuff.
Look. Couple points on this. One, not every movie can focus on the linguistics as much as Arrival, because that's the entire point of that movie. And two, to be fair, Iron Giant can at least make noises, right? The beings in Arrival were so different that they did not speak in words. They spoke in a symbol. It was so vastly different that they had to go to square one. How do we translate this?
I'm not saying that it like ruins this part of the movie for me, but I just found myself thinking about Arrival during those scenes. And I also, it's a few scenes later when Dean ends up finding out that Hogarth does say, like, he's not good at speaking, but he's good at understanding. And I like that little thing where it implies that, like, he's not just, you know, an average being that has to learn language from scratch. Like, he's able to pick up on this much quicker than other creatures would be able to. He's
analyzing what people are saying to him. He gets it from context. He's putting it together. Who knows? Maybe he's beaming some TV shows into his head or something to like learn.
Pull a bumblebee
aggressively. Who knows? But yeah, so it really sets this up, and then the Iron Giant wants to come with him, and he's like, "No, you can't come with me. You have to stay. You have to stay back. Don't come with me." And it's not working. The Iron Giant just keeps following him because it's starting to get dark. He's like, "I need to get home. Mom's going to freak out if I'm not home again." Yada yada yada. And what happens here is that they cross a train track, and the Iron Giant sees the train track and goes, metal, meat like metal. And he picks up the train track and he splits it in half, and he's about to start chomping. And Hogarth's like, "No, you idiot, you can't do that. You've ruined the train track." And then just as he says that, you just hear the wee wee. I was like, oh no, you've got to put that back down. And what I love about this, in sort of a foreshadowing sense, is that one of the most famous scenes of Superman is Superman like sort of like connecting a train track for a train to go over it. So I love the foreshadowing that the Iron Giant, well, he caused the damage in the first place, puts the train track back and even flattens it, and he actually gets hit because he's too busy lining it up to be perfect. Like, and to be fair, Hogarth's yelling at him like, "Hey, that's good enough, move, the train's going to hit you." But part of me was thinking, well, if it's not lined up perfectly, it'll probably derail. So the Iron Giant probably should be like getting it as fine-tuned as he possibly can here, to be honest.
I mean, here's the question for you. Let's say it has a 30% chance of derailing. Let's even bump it up to 50. 50% chance of derailing.
50-50.
Or 100% chance to hit a giant robot.
I'm going to
go with the 50% chance.
Here's my thing. I feel that the Iron Giant intentionally let itself be detachable at the moment of impact so that it wouldn't just be a brick wall, right? Because that's what you don't want. You don't want it to just be like a thick, heavy wall that the train is going to hit. So,
and don't get me wrong, I don't think they said there were any deaths or anything here.
No.
But, like, this train is still totaled. It is still gone.
Yes, the front of the train is smashed, yes.
Yeah, regardless, it does still result in massive property damage.
To be fair, though, the Iron Giant doesn't know that he's about to like cause that damage. He's just trying to line up the train track because he's been told he's supposed to, and he's taking it very seriously. From
Hogarth's point of view here, once it's good enough, I think that it's good enough. Get the robot out of the track.
Yes, but this is important. We have to establish some key rules about the Iron Giant here.
Yes, that is true.
Namely, that when he's been split apart, his little bits and pieces will all come homing home and reattach themselves, and he gets fixed. So we see that in play, and it leads to one of my favorite sequences in the movie, which is at the house. But obviously there's a couple of things we have to set up for that. So he hides the Iron Giant in the barn or whatever at the house, and he's having dinner with his mum, and then the Iron Giant's hand, which hadn't quite reattached yet, is in the kitchen. So we get the whole hijinks of him trying to like hide and distract his mom and get the hand to move.
We also, I love this sequence of he's told to say grace when he first realizes that the hand's in there. And every single thing he says of just like, okay, dear God. And then he sees the hand and he's just like, no, more war in the world, and get out of here, Satan. Like it's such a kid thing, and I think that's what I really appreciate in this with Hogarth's character, is that he feels like a kid. A lot of these times when they do these characters, the characters are so forward thinking, they're so like rational and stuff like that, that it feels like it is just kind of an adult. that is writing the kid, and the kid doesn't have, like, you know, they'll enjoy the whimsy or whatever, but it feels more like an adult character. But Hogarth, from beginning to end here, feels like a kid who's just super stoked to have a giant robot with him the entire time.
I mean, he's super into movies and comics and all that sort of thing. He's very into like using his imagination. That kind of explains why when he thinks of something outside, he suits up like he's in a movie, because that's how he thinks. He's a kid. And also, by this point in the movie, we did get the introduction to Kent Mansley, who showed up, and very important here, he was not taking this mission seriously at all. He shows up, he thinks this is a little hick town that he wants nothing to do with, and he's like, hey, do you know where big things happen? They happen in big places. This is a little place, and the quicker I can fill out my stupid report, I can get back to those big things, instead of being here in Maine.
Oh God, Maine.
But of course, as he's like just getting the eyewitness testimony and he's talking to them about the train, or the train's not even happened yet, I don't think. His car, he gets back into his car, and then he looks over to the other side, and the passenger side of the car has had a big bite taken out of it, and he screams like a little girl and like jumps out of the car and goes to fetch the witness he was just talking to. But then when he brings the witness back, the car's completely gone. The Iron Giant's just kind of swiped it for a snack, and all that's left is the thing they found at the power plant, which is Hogarth's BB gun.
Yep, which has the name cut off, so it just says Hog Hug.
Yes. Important plot detail for a little bit. Well, quite soon actually, to be honest. Yep. But right, so we had him introduced, right, and he's basically went from being this skeptic who doesn't believe a goddamn thing to the car being bit and then the car disappearing and him being like, no, there's actually something here. I now have the bloodlust. I have to be the one that finds this. I have to be the one that identifies this threat, because it's definitely a threat, right? He's made that decision already in his head.
There's a point later on in this movie where he goes full tilt explaining his like worldview to Hogarth.
Yes.
And it definitely backtraces here, where it comes down to, we don't know what it is. And if the U.S. government doesn't know what it is a threat and should be treated as such. And that's basically how he views the giant throughout this entire movie.
It's wild how close this is to a certain quote from a little film called Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, where Batman says something to the effect of, if there's a small chance that he is a threat, then we have to treat it as an absolute certainty. And I'm like...
Notice how one was said by the villain of the story?
Yes, the villain.
And the other said by Batman.
Oh, dear. But what happens here is that when Hogarth is sneaking the hand out of the house, he opens the front door, and Kent Mansley's standing right there.
Yeah, in the in-between, when the train stuff happened, the mayor's office is called, and Kent was already there trying to like pitch the idea that the giant was a thing. He was like, oh, there's something out there. We're going to need all these towns' resources, and of course I'll be the one who's in charge of that, because I need to be the one who figures this out. And then when the train call comes in, it's just like, what do you mean it looks like a giant metal man? And Kent just picks up the phone and like steals the mayor's car.
Yeah, and I know the house is nearby, so he goes there just to make a phone call. He's not even investigating anything at the house. He's just there to make a phone call. And again, this is all played for a good bit of comedy, where he opens the door, he says, hey, I'm Kent Mansley, I'm with the Bureau or whatever.
The U.S. government, slam.
Yeah, slugger, slam door. And then the mum comes out, is like, who is that? And then she opens the door, and he basically just says the same thing again. It's a good bit of fun. He comes in to make his phone call, and, you know, Hogarth sneaking around trying to get the hand out. It's up in the bathroom and whatnot at one point. But Ken actually leaves, right? He's had his phone call. The general's basically said, this is a bunch of hooey. You don't have any real evidence. It goes back to watching his Western, right? That's the general's attitude. So Ken is leaving the house, and it's not until he's leaving where he happens to catch the names, right? Where the mum says, hey, you know, I'm so-and-so, and this is my son Hogarth. And he leaves, he gets in the car, he's like, Hogarth, what a stupid name. Why not just name him something like Zeppo? And then it clicks, and he looks down at the gun that's had the name cut off. He's like, Hogarth Howard, it's him. So he goes back and knocks on the door again. Or Hughes, sorry, yeah, whatever the last name was. And Hogarth opens the door, and he's standing there again for the third time in the space of like 5 minutes of this kid's life. This guy's at the door. And so we get
He's
all
like,
of
Ken
that.
Mansley, agent for the government. I know.
So he kind of forces his way in and makes with a small talk and whatnot, and starts asking him questions and stuff.
That's where Hogarth, like, the toilet flushes upstairs, so you get the fact that the hand is up in the bathroom, so he has to go deal with that. And the mom starts making the small talk, and she's like, it's so weird, he's so tight-lipped about what he heard. Before he was mentioning, like, 50-foot robots. And Ken's like, what? That's crazy. Oh, what a imagination that kid has. What else did he say?
Yes. That change in voice, that tone of change when he says, what else did he say? Perfect.
Yes.
Absolutely perfect. Although I really love the moment. This is one of these moments where the animation did a great job with the mum. Is when Hogarth is in the bathroom trying to get out the hand from the window, and he's like he's struggling, so he's like go. He's sort of like making those noises, and they're standing at the door, and he's like, this is really why it's important to chew your food. And the look the mum gives him, as if he's just insulted her parenting. Like, she's not told him to do that. Like, it's gold. And then Hogarth has to think very quick on his feet when the mum's going to barge in anyway, so he just quickly like pulls down his trousers and sits on the toilet seat. And he's like, Jesus, mum, privacy. Very effective, I have to say.
Yeah, and the mom, like, slams the door on Kent's face. Kent pulls out, and I think the mom says something along the lines like, well, I guess that explains why he's been acting so weird recently, saying that, like, him being constipated is the whole reason as to why everything's been happening.
Hey, it pushed me in a mood. I can't deny that.
Yeah, absolutely. But at that point, Kent gets back into his car and is just like, all right, Hogarth, we're going to see each other real soon.
Yeah, really menacing. He's really, he's got his eyes set and things now. And I think what gets me about the Kent character is that they do such a great job of presenting him as someone who's just trying to get ahead for his own career, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's who the character is. It's about him proving himself to rise up the rankings. And that's obviously shown even more so later on when he's a complete coward and doesn't care about the country. He wanted to hunt this thing to get the credit for hunting it, for being the one who saved the country. But he's not actually there to serve his country. There's a very big difference in the context of this character. So, yeah. Basically, it's like, okay, Iron Giant's hanging out in the barn. This is when we get the first sort of reference to Superman, where he brings out the comic books. And he's like, hey, I've got the Spirit. Because a couple of name drops, like Mad Magazine. He's got a couple of things. And he's like, hey,
all of them WB. Every single one of them are DC properties.
All owned by Warner Bros. But he picks up Action Comics and says, and this guy's Superman. And he is kind of like you. He's an alien that came from outer space, and he uses his powers for good, never for evil. And it's a really good little moment, because obviously you could look at it and say, they're shoehorning Superman into this. But it's so thematically well done for the rest of the movie that it's like, it's perfect. But of course, the robot notices this other comic underneath, that it's like an evil robot on the cover that's like,
it's Atomo, the metal menace.
And it's like firing like these dangerous looking laser beams, and he's like, huh? What's that? Am I like that? And he's like, no, you're like Superman. This guy's the villain, right? You're not a villain. You're like Superman.
You're a good guy.
Yeah. And I do like the idea that this comes initially from the belief of this kid that he's the good person, and that maybe inspires the Iron Giant to want to be the good person. That's a kind of a sweet element of this. But he's hungry. Okay, we need to find some metal. They go looking, and they eventually find like a derelict car that's been sitting there for a while. And he's like, yeah, it's probably okay to eat that. It's just a bit of scrap, basically. But just as he's about to do it, that's when Dean comes up with the tow truck, and he's like, wait a minute, he works at a scrapyard. That's a buffet. That's Metal City.
All of our problems are solved.
No one's going to complain except him, because he makes sculptures in like modern art out of the scrap metal that he collects.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen Dean probably for like 20-30 minutes at this point in the movie. So it's a good job where they set him up the first time in the cafe, and then the second time where he's towing the tractor of the guy. Because I think if we didn't have that second time, we would have been a bit confused as like, okay, but like, why is he here again, sort of thing. Like, it's just been a bit too long if we didn't have that little interstitial.
I think that second one does two things. It sets up that this is what he does, that he works at a scrapyard. And he also has a little conversation where he talks to the mum again. And there's just a little moment where it's a little bit flirtatious, and he's kind of, she ends up talking about him, and he's, he's a good kid. So, again, he's likable in the scene. He kind of sticks up for Hogarth,
I will say that is a difference between editions there, because I did not have him talking to the mom before the end of the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
For anybody who doesn't know, there are two editions of this movie: the theatrical cut, which came out in '99, which is what I watched, and then they did a re-release called the Signature Edition in 2015, which apparently was the one Pete watched.
I thought there was only one extra scene in this cut. Apparently, there's two. So fair enough. Okay. Maybe there's more that we'll discover, but that was the other one. I think it's right before. It's around that part of the movie. It's somewhere in there, but you get another scene with the mum at the diner. There's a nice little scene though. So. Yeah, basically they go to the scrapyard, he starts chomping and stuff, and Dean eventually hears some stuff and comes out with his crowbar. Doesn't see the robot yet, but does see Hogarth. Hogarth comes in and kills time. And this is where Hogarth insists that he can drink coffee, because as he puts it, he's hip.
I'm hip. I'm cool. I drink coffee all the time. And Dean's like, this is espresso, and this will kill you. Smash, do it.
Smash cut to Hogarth talking like he's on speed, walking around circles around Dean, complaining about his mom and you know, whatever else.
I really appreciate the sequence, because I always, you know, it's played for the joke that he's talking really fast.
Yes.
But it actually gives a lot more character to Hogarth if you really listen to what he's saying, because what he's talking about is the fact that his mom basically says, like, he was moved ahead in school. He was too smart for the grade he was in, so they bumped him up a few grades. But now that he's in the higher up grade, he's smaller than all the other kids, and they like pick on him for it. And he doesn't really have any friends there. And he does, you know, he is smarter than all the other kids there, but he doesn't view himself as more intelligent. It's not like a cockiness thing. He literally just says, like, all you got to do is do the homework. That's literally all it is. You do the homework, and that's like, you get ahead. Like, that's all you got to do. And so just this tiny little piece here gives so much more backstory as to like who he is and why he doesn't have like other friends he hangs out with, why he does have this attachment to not only the giant, but like when he was going after squirrels and stuff like that, it's because he doesn't have friends his own age, really. He doesn't have anyone else he can relate to.
Yeah, and he's even kind of become friends with Dean over the course of these scenes. Again, it's kind of, he's reaching out for companionship in some way. But ultimately, of course, Dean does see the Iron Giant and freaks out considerably. Iron Giant picks him up, and it's a whole thing. But he does reluctantly agree. Although I feel like he only agrees because he doesn't have it in him to put up a fight. He's like, yeah, I can stay till morning. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
This is one of the very few times there is a comedy like time passing card, because he basically he's explaining the Iron Giant to Dean, and Dean's like, okay, yeah, all right, I get it. And he's like, yeah, he needs a place to stay. And Dean just pours out his coffee, walks inside, slams the door behind him, and it cuts to 37 minutes later.
Yeah, I forgot.
Hogarth just sitting outside his door being like, he's not a problem, please.
I forgot about the title, or the caption saying 37 minutes later. I did not remember that was a thing here.
I forgot about it until it was watched through, and I was like, that's so, it's so funny, because the lead into it as well, because it's just a single static shot of Dean, without a word, pouring out his drink, walking into the house, closing the door. Nothing is said, but you immediately get the idea that, like, I'm not doing this. I'm not giving this giant a place to stay. And it's only after 40 minutes of breaking him down that he's like, fine, all right, he can stay for the night. Only the night.
Now Dean finally understands what it's like to be his mum.
Yep.
That's the experience he's just got in the last hour, all condensed in.
There you go.
Fun times.
He's truly able to take over the parenting role now.
Yeah. So Hogarth goes home, and I love this little section actually, because he basically crawls up to bed. It's morning already, and he's just opening the covers in the bed, and then the mum walks in and goes, "Oh, you're already up, honey?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just making the bed."
You see this pain on his face for like 3 frames of just like, no. Oh, God.
And then he goes downstairs, and he just sees like someone with a newspaper sitting at the breakfast table, and he's like, huh? And then the paper just goes down. He's like, "Hey, a sport!" And I'm like, wait, the mum like get hitched or something like overnight.
Yeah, to start dating Ken.
No, apparently they've been looking for someone to rent the extra bedroom to earn some money. I'm like, okay, all right. Especially in the 50s, this was more of a thing for sure. Yeah. So it's like, okay, but he's obviously doing this because he thinks Hogarth knows something. He wants to spy on him. He wants to connive and figure out. And I think the thing with Ken is that as the movie goes on, it shows how actually kind of weaselly and evil he is. So far, he's not been evil yet, right? Like, obviously,
so far it feels like a guy doing his job. He's
an antagonist. He's very enthusiastic about doing it, right? Maybe to a point where he's unlikable for it, but he's not evil yet. There's definitely some moments later, though, where he is just evil with some of the things he decides to do. But, yeah, so this is the status quo he's in, and he's hounding. This is where we get the montage of him like saying the 50 different nicknames and trying to like just get Hogarth to speak. And just as Hogarth is finally going to sneak away, the mum turns around and says,
calling him. Dean's just like, hey, it's the morning, get your giant robot.
The mum's like, hey, why don't you take Ken here out and show him around town? And Ken's like, yeah, I'd love that, Spurt, or whatever the other nickname he had for him.
Scout, Ranger, Tiger, Slugger.
So Hogarth's solution to this, to lose him, is to take him for milkshakes, and he says, hey, this is something I like to do. I like to sprinkle some chocolate onto the milkshake. But the chocolate he gives him are laxatives.
Yep, Cocoa Lax, which, strangely enough, out of all the things that have stayed in my mind about this movie since I first saw it, the Cocoa Lax has never left my mind. The fact that this man was, like, poisoned by this kid to get away from him, that's always stuck in my mind for some reason.
I think poison's a harsh word, but...
He was given a substance that he did not appreciate, and his body did not appreciate either.
Look, Ken, later on in this movie, chloroforms this boy. So,
oh, yeah, no. He deserves it. I'm not saying he doesn't, but it's always just stuck in my mind, the fact that Hogarth was willing to go that far that quick.
Like, maybe they shouldn't be, but laxatives have always been the comedy acceptable form of spiking someone's drink.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? For comedy's sake, it's always been... Maybe it shouldn't be, because no one should actually do it in real life, but yeah, it does make him go to the toilet. But he gets quite aggressive with him and gets in his face, asking him questions by the end of the scene.
I mean, it's basically just breaking down, like I said, his worldview, where he's just like, do you feel safe, Hogarth? Because the only reason you feel safe is because people like me down in Washington don't feel safe. And we do everything we can to get everything that we don't know locked down or killed. And
it's so weird to hear down in Washington, because like most places in the US are south of Washington, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like smack dab in the middle. It's like...
Is it?
It's literally like a couple dozen miles south of the Mason-Dixon line. So it's like right in the middle of North and South.
I think it was that far. I thought it was closer to, like, I don't know.
I mean, the problem being is that, like, New England, like all the stuff that's north up, there's a lot of states up there, but it's not very populated. If you talk about population-wise, that is probably more underneath the South.
Because I thought it was only a few hours' drive from New York.
I mean, it is, but that's what... that entire northeast area is all very clumped together.
Okay, oh yeah. Fair enough. Anyway, so Hogarth makes his great escape, and so yeah, obviously he has to talk to Dean a bit, but like this is where we get to like, okay, how are we going to use the robot? Because Dean wants to use him for practical things.
I mean, as Hogarth puts it, arts and crafts.
Yeah, arts and crafts. And he's like, well, how would you use them then? Cut to the Iron Giant holding a car that Hogarth's sitting in with his goggles and like helmet on, and then the Iron Giant just spins around at Mach 6 or whatever speed he's going at,
breaking the sound barrier.
And Hogarth's just screaming at the top of his lungs and is eventually like, okay, that's enough, Iron Giant, please put me down. But it's all, yeah, this is kind of entertaining. This is like showing, okay, more other bonding. Even Dean's kind of bonding a little bit.
They go down to the nearby lake and do cannonballs, which is to say Hogarth does one cannonball and then the Iron Giant just empties the reservoir.
Yes, causes a mini tidal wave, effectively, which is funny because obviously Dean doesn't want to go in, but then gets swept away in the water regardless. Yep. So, like, all of that, good fun. Meanwhile, obviously, you've still got Kent being all nosy and whatnot. Now,
he's going around town getting more clues, trying to see what he can find.
But the big thing here is that we kind of get another side of Iron Giant, because when they're playing around and Hogarth's using his like sort of toy laser gun, he points it.
Well,
wait, is that right? Yeah?
I think it's important. I think it's important to say first is the deer scene.
Oh, of course, yeah, the deer scene. That's the first time you see the red eyes. You're right. Because they see a deer right in the forest, and it's majestic and it's beautiful, and it's like, oh, that's sweet as a deer. Go about their business. Gunshot. Yep.
It's like, wow, it's such a cute little thing. I sure hope it goes off and bang. Oh, no.
Oh, no. Did Bambi have it coming?
Yeah.
But they go off, and there's a couple of hunters. Right? And these hunters aren't treated like they're villains or anything like that. They're just, they're hunters. But they run off when they see the Iron Giant, and they come down, and the Iron Giant, like, prods the deer, and Hogarth has to explain that it's dead, and that these are guns, and guns killed this animal, and that's what guns do. And when Iron Giant looks down at the gun, his like pupils like dilate, right? It's like he's got these like things that like sort of shutter around.
Like the aperture, yeah.
And then his eyes go red as well. And it's like he's got a Terminator vision because he sees this gun, and it's like, oh no, the combat mode's been initiated, and it's just for a split second. It's not like he snaps out of it fairly quickly here, but it's just this little tease that there is something that might happen. Which has kind of been teased because we're hearing Kent say he wants to like go after this thing. He sees it as a threat. So what happens when he brings big guns to go after the Iron Giant? So it's building that really effectively, because it's giving you both sides of that equation, where you realize, oh no, this might escalate really badly. And we're in a time period where the Cold War, everyone was worried about that escalating into a warm war. So a atomically warm war. So
but yeah, no,
really
we go back to the junkyard after that, and we basically get like the metaphysical talk of this movie, where Hogarth has to like he did some blanket explanation as to like what the death is and all that sort of stuff, but then he gets into the idea of like, yeah, no, everything dies eventually, but we all have souls, and souls don't end up dying. And then the Iron Giant's like, do I have a soul? Am I going to die? And Hogarth's like, I don't know if you're going to die. That's a big question there. But all good things, according to my mom, have souls, and you are definitely a good thing. So you definitely won't die in that regard. And it seems like the Giant's taking this in. Like he's contemplating his own existence at this point.
Yeah. It's worth mentioning as well, the scene that he had Hogarth with Dean, where he was talking about his life and mom and school and all that. At one point, Dean kind of explains, hey, you get to be who you choose to be. You get to choose who you want to be. I like to point that phrase out because it comes up in a big way later.
Yeah, he was saying it in the way of like, oh, I'm getting bullied and stuff like that. What am I supposed to do? And Dean brings it up in that context, but it is a major reverberation later on in this movie.
Yeah, because it is Hogarth that uses it. He's heard it be used here, and he uses it towards the end of the movie.
I mean, as much as this movie is about guns coming back up over and over again, this movie is a master of setting up the Chekhov's gun in terms of like lines and bringing them back later on as a either similar or completely different meaning altogether. But it sets it up beautifully in the first half to get it there in the back end.
It's a very, very tight script, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was the part that got me, was that we already had him interacting with the Iron Giant like 10 minutes into the movie. We waste absolutely no time getting this stuff set up.
No, yeah, a modern movie would give you half an hour of his life first before he encounters the Iron Giant. Which, depending on what the movie's doing or saying, that might not be a bad thing, but I feel like all movies now would do that, regardless, just because they feel like they have to pad things out to at least 2 hours. Right. So from here, obviously, we get the second tease of like the red eyes and all that, and it's this really scary moment.
I did not get this one.
Really, the second tease with the red eyes isn't in the movie?
I thought this was the scene that you were talking about the first time around. Yeah, no, the are you talking about the gun scene, or are you talking about the dream sequence?
The gun sequence.
Oh, the gun sequence. Yeah, I thought the dream sequence.
I was going to say that has to be in the original cut. Because that leads to Dean like understanding that it's a defense thing, so it has to be there.
I thought that this was the dream sequence coming up next, but all right.
Maybe the dream sequence is, honestly, like, it's hard to place that. I think that comes because it happens when both Dean is sleeping inside watching TV and the Iron Giant sleeping outside in the scrapyard. Because I'm pretty sure after that dream sequence, it cuts to Hogarth arriving home. So I think it's before he gets home at the end of one of his days spending time with them. So it's,
and that's the interstitial here, is because I noticed when I did watch the dream sequence on YouTube just to know what I was missing, it showed Giant like rolling onto his back, and that's exactly where the sequence for my version leaves off, of him rolling onto his back looking up at the stars. So the dream sequence, just for anyone who doesn't know, it's this thing where the Giant starts having like a nightmare of some sort, and it starts interfering with the TV that Dean had left on, and then we get a little bit of seeing theoretically what was the Giant's homeworld or something.
It's open for, I think, interpretation. Is this him having a nightmare that this is what he's supposed to be, or is this him having like a nightmare of like a memory of like this is what he was built for? And given that he has so many weapons built in, as we see later, it would make sense that he was built for combat in some way, and this is what he's supposed to be. And I think it works better for the themes if that's what he was supposed to be, because it's this idea of, I'm not going to be what they made me to be, right? It's very, it's very Logan, you know, don't be what they made you to be, kind of thing.
I mean, the number one trivia on IMDb here is that this movie's conceptual from Brad Bird was because his own sister ended up being killed by gun violence, and his pitch to it was basically, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And that's what this all came out from. And I think that that's exactly, this idea of he's built to do these things. He knows that he feels that deep down, but he doesn't want to. And it's a beautiful way of exploring that.
It obviously extends to the biggest idea of a gun, which is a nuclear bomb, right? That's the biggest gun in the world, right? And all the way down to like a regular one. It is interesting because obviously Hogarth has a BB gun, and that gets destroyed pretty quickly and is ineffective early on. I wonder if that's an intentional choice as well, of being like, just, you know, let's just smash the symbolism of that right immediately. So the nightmare scene is a decent little sequence, and it's the one that sticks out as being that, you know, that wasn't here before. Honestly, it's only two small sequences, at least as far as we've found so far, so I don't think that there's any reason to prefer either cut, really, unless you really like these additions. I guess I'll put it this way: I don't think there's any reason to be mad if the signature cut's the only one that's available. Like, I don't think I would look at this and go, "Oh, I can't believe the original cut with better pacing isn't available." Like, it's not. It's such a minor difference that it's not affecting that in any way, shape, or form. It's still 90 minutes long.
No. I mean, without knowing exactly where that earlier scene with Dean and the mom takes place, I can't. Even if I did insert that dream sequence in here, the pacing is still top notch. Like, it is so tightly written. I can't say that an extra 20 seconds here or there is going to take away in any meaningful regard. And
I do think both scenes add overall. They don't change anything. They just sort of further enhance things that were already being hinted at in the movie anyway. So, if anything, the fact that the mom and Dean are kind of a couple at the end after a time jump, it feels more natural in this cut because they interacted a little bit more. So, I did find that weird at the end of the movie where she says honey, and I'm like, you guys have talked twice. Well,
but
3 times in this cut.
Exactly.
But it was without Hogarth around, which I think actually made it even more of a, like, you're interacting without him as like a buffer. This is just you and her talking, so it feels a bit more. So anyway, but yeah, we have the whole big thing with him pointing the laser gun at him, and the eyes going red because he's incorrectly reading this as an actual gun, and Hogarth just happens to like move because something with his gun's not working, and he just doesn't even notice that the Iron Giant's fired like a laser at him. But of course, Dean kind of like starts to like take notice of what's going on and has to intervene, and ultimately he does almost get fried the second time the eye lasers fire, and he has to jump in, and he snaps out of it. They get him to sort of wake up from it, but Dean gets really upset. He's like, you almost did this to Hogarth, and he shows him the big hole in the car or whatever it is that's been melted. You almost did this, you almost killed him. And it's sort of, you know, it's hitting these beats that we've already seen from him, where he's seen that he is this, he's that. I think it's also maybe a little bit before this, we get the whole moment where he is like, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a villain or do you want to be a hero? And he picks up the random S like thing.
Yeah, that's during this sequence, because Hogarth is playing around saying like, all right, and the beautiful hero whatever comes and attacks a Tomo, and Iron Giant's basically just like moping. He's like, I'm not a Tomo. I don't want to be a Tomo. A Tomo's evil. And he's like, all right, fine. What do you want to be? And he picks up the S and goes, I'm Superman.
Yeah, it's really nice. But this is where things start to kind of unravel a little bit.
So this actually, I didn't want to interrupt you because it is a very important scene, but this actually takes place after all of the rest of the Kent Mansley stuff happens.
Oh, really? Is that all before this? Yeah. Fair enough. Honestly, like they're fairly separate for a while, in terms of everything that Kent Mansley's done. Because Kent Mansley, like, he waits back one night waiting for Hogarth to come home, and when Hogarth comes in the barn, he's like waiting for him in the dark, and he's like, hey Hogarth, you're late for dinner now. Oh, he is full villain. He chloroforms the kid. He tells the kid, "Oh, I found your camera at one of the previous sites where you dropped it, and there's a photograph. The very first photograph you took of the Iron Giant. I found it. I've got the evidence. The army's coming in the morning, and you can't get out anywhere." And Hogarth goes back into his bedroom and tries to lift up his window to sneak out, and it's all just nailed down. And then in walks Kent with a shitty grin on his face, like, you're not going anywhere. I'm going to keep an eye on you. And he walks across to the bedroom that's across the hall. He sits in the bed and just stares. Yeah.
I also, the whole reason they called in the army for the morning is that he didn't know where the robot was. He has to get Hogarth to reveal that. And Hogarth's not going to give that up for any reason. But then Kent's basically like, being a single mom's really hard. We could make that infinitely harder, to the point where it would be irresponsible of us to leave you in her care. And he's basically saying, like, we're going to ruin your mom's life if you don't tell us what's going on. Yeah, no, he's the worst. And he does eventually give up the junkyard, but he knows the whole reason he's trying to sneak out. He's like, I have to warn Dean beforehand so we can come up with some kind of plan.
And the reveal in the morning, right? Because so Hogarth gets into bed, he puts his like sort of helmet thing on, and he just sort of like folds his arms and just stares back. And time's clearly passing, and eventually they're both getting tired. But Hogarth looks like he's fallen asleep, and he's turned over, and Kent looks like he's won. He's like, ah ha ha ha. But he still stays there, sitting there. But he does obviously fall asleep eventually as well. And when he wakes up in the morning, he's staring back across the hall. It looks like Hogarth's still there. And obviously, we've all seen movies. We all know the whole trick of putting the pillow and a couple of things under the covers to make it look someone's there. That's why the helmet was being worn, because it's easy to have that pretend to be the head, blah, blah, blah. Yep. The fact that they've done that isn't that special. That's fine. What I love about it is the way they reveal it. Instead of him walking in the room and finding it and like being angry as he pulls off the sheets, he's looking across the hall. He's like, he's still there. My falling asleep wasn't a problem. I didn't screw up. And then in the foreground, Hogarth just walks past the camera and goes, hey, Ken. It just keeps walking.
Goes downstairs,
the implication just being he's already been out, he's already warned, he's already done everything he needed to do, and he's back. And he gets to be smug about it. So Kent is furious.
Yep, and then that's when the mom walks in being like, hey, Kent, why is the U.S. Army on our front lawn?
Yep, and then they all go over to the junkyard, and basically the story they're going with is that they're going to pretend that the Iron Giant is just a big piece of art.
It's a giant art piece sculpture that, like, Dean plays up. He's just like, oh, yeah, I got this dude in New York. He's already bought it for his hotel lobby. You guys are real lucky you got here in time before I had to sell it.
Yeah, and then Sergeant Martin Crane's like, you idiot, Kent, I'm having your job. You're cleaning out your desk. This was a big waste of time.
You are so reserved in how you're recounting, because he is screaming in Kent's face. He's like, you're going to be inspector of subway toilets when I'm done with you.
And because I think when he crossed the line of actually like cornering a child, threatening to take his mother away, and like interrogating him without a parent present, like that's where he just crossed a line so hard that you can just take complete glee in him being made to look like a fool here. You can just enjoy
anything that
it.
happens to Kent after that scene. I will argue that they then double down and make Kent worse later on, obviously. Yeah. But I think even without that, anything after that scene, Kent deserves it. Like, there's no way to justify his character's actions anymore.
Absolutely. So, eventually the Iron Giant moves. I did like it a little bit, though, and this, again, kind of pointed to the potential relationship between the mum and Dean, is as she's, like, on her way out, she's like, this big, looking at the Iron Giant when she says this big piece of art you've done is kind of weird, because it just looks like you've tacked some things on to, like, the base skeleton is.
A core piece underneath of it that you just threw some stop signs on. Kind of weird.
But this thing over here is a bit nicer. And he's like, wait, oh, you like that? You like this thing that I made? And it's actually one of his art pieces that he's done. So it's just that little moment of, like, oh, she's actually appreciating his art. And he's like, oh, you like the real thing I made? Oh. Maybe.
Well, hey, Hogarth, I need you to get out here for a while.
So the Iron Giant gets back up and starts moving and all that.
That's where we get the gun scene.
Yeah. Is this what the gun scene? Oh, I guess it is. Yeah, it must.
The red gun, yeah.
It's I'm just mixing it up because but you're right. It must take place after, because Dean for like a little period here is like anti-Iron Giant because he thinks he's dangerous. It's not until he sees like the toy laser gun on the ground and realizes, oh shit, he was being defensive. Like it was like an automated defense mode. So it becomes this whole thing. And this is like the Iron Giant. What lures him out to the town again?
Well, he's just walking in the snow. They basically say, "Get out of here."
He's doing the Michael Cera walk from Arrested Development. He's just really sad because he's being like disregarded and told to leave.
He takes the Superman crest that was still on his chest and he casts it aside because he doesn't feel like he's earned it.
Hero no more.
Then back in Rockwell, there are some kids up on top of a tower with some binoculars, and they actually see the Iron Giant, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's it! That's the monster! It's there! We can see it!" And as they're so eager to see it, the railing of this clock tower or whatever gives way, and the kids are just dangling, only being held up by the strap of the binoculars.
They're dangling off a roof. A crowd kind of forms on the street, looking up in terror that they're going to fall and die. And the Iron Giant hears this. And he actually has a chance to be Superman because he comes swooping in, he puts his hand in, and you can maybe debate if like the big metal hand of this thing would actually soften the blow of the fall any, because it looked like it was still quite far down, but
it has more give. It was able to take the kids and then cradle the fall.
I'm just saying, from a science perspective, maybe you could dispute this, but
I mean, they were going to break like 10 ribs each regardless, but this way they save their legs.
But they fall into his hand. He puts the kids down, and like everyone in the town's looking up at it. But the dad who's just got his kids back, or the mum or whoever it is, they're looking up and like they're looking with thankful eyes. They're in awe.
It's gentle. It's okay. It's a cool thing.
You saved my kids, and everyone's kind of looking at it. And even Hogarth's mum's around at this point, I think, and sees it because she was in the diner maybe. So you're having this great moment where it's kind of like, again, much like Superman, the first outing of Superman, where he saves someone and the crowd that's seen it is like, hey, this he's powerful, he's stronger than us, that could be scary, but he's doing good things.
He's good. Even if we don't understand him, he has the capability to be good.
Cut to Kent, riding in the military jeep with the others, and he looks out the window or in the mirror maybe, and he sees the Iron Giant towering in the middle of the town, and he's like, quick, General, it's attacking this town, it's attacking the city.
It's not even that. He is so flabbergasted. He's like, get to the town to look at it. He's just like throwing out random syllables enough to get the general to turn around.
And the general's like, mother of God, all right, let's get going. So we go back to the town. They're having this angelic moment where they're all looking up at the Iron Giant, and then out of nowhere, this rocket just hits them in the back from a tank.
Mind you, Hogarth's already been picked back up at this point. He gets into town. He's in the Giant's hand as he's being attacked.
Yeah, he's kind of like bridging the gap and saying, hey, look, see, he's friendly. Like, no one has to be scared of him. And like Iron Giant holds him up, and
Giants gives one line before the attack where he looks down at Hogarth after everything that's happened there. He makes the distinction. You are what you choose to be. He says, I am not a gun.
Yep.
He outright says that.
So it's a beautiful moment. But honestly, everything from this moment to the ending is perfection. Like, there's nothing I want to fault here from this point on, because it is just fantastic. Yeah. Because they start firing things at Iron Giant, and Iron Giant goes on the run, right? They're running through the forest or whatever. They eventually get to a cliff, and Iron Giant goes off the cliff, right? And this is the big reveal that he's got jet boosters in his feet. And I think what always sticks out from this moment for me, more than anything else, is just Hogarth saying, you can fly? Like, just the way he says that is always just sort of stuck in my head. And then there's a great shot of like the edge of the cliff because the mum's been chasing after him or whatever, and the Iron Giant's like huge body just flying up past her. It's just a really great visual.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in town, we had Dean is trying to tell Kent, like, hey, if you attack it, it will attack back. It is only defensive if you want to keep this calm. Also, Hogarth is in his hands, so like you can't kill it. And Kent's like, got it. We'll pass along the message. He immediately turns around to the general. It's just like, he killed a kid. Launch everything.
Yeah. So before we said he was evil, now he's into like satanic villain status because he's basically saying, yeah, we're safe to fire everything we've got at it. Right? Not only is it bad because he's ignored the advice that this thing is completely it's not dangerous at all as long as you don't fire at it. He's also now throwing the kid under the bus by saying, yeah, there's no reason to worry about a civilian. There's nothing to be concerned about. Just fire everything.
Well, up to the point where it was they went to the army base or whatever. Yes, he was evil. Yes, he chloroformed Hogarth, but it did still feel like it was all in service of, he still wants to be regarded well. He still wants to be promoted at work, doing whatever. He wants to be recognized for finding the giant. But now, because he says, like, Hogarth is in his hands, this is where it ticks over into revenge, where Kent is like, this kid nearly ruined everything. I don't give a damn if he survives.
He's bloodthirsty. He's a super villain at this point. So, yeah, and this is the thing. We get these great sequences of Iron Giant flying, and the kid even... And I love this, that he doesn't just do it naturally. The kid says, put your arms out like Superman. And then the Iron Giant, and as someone who's a fan of Superman, having a kid instill the ideals of Superman onto this giant alien robot who he's teaching right from wrong, like, it's kind of perfect in a weird way. The kid's effectively become his man Pa Kent by just emulating the lessons of Superman, and it's very touching to me. It works really well.
I really like at the end of the sequence when Hogarth goes up into the tornado after holding out his hand like that.
Straight your face. You don't like to talk about that. But obviously, eventually, the giant gets hit with like it's dodging some rockets. It all looks great, but eventually it does get hit, and they fall. And I think what's really notable about, like, okay, he does go into battle mode. He does become kind of this unstoppable killing machine, and it almost looks like a scene out of like a 50s sci-fi movie of him stomping through the town, firing cannons and whatnot. I love that the inciting moment for that, where he loses himself, is because he thinks Hogarth is dead. He thinks the kid that he cares about, the one who's taught him right from wrong, is dead, and it forces him to snap. Like, he loses grip of like whatever consciousness that he's gained, and goes into battle mode, and starts firing at the tanks, and they're flipping over and all the rest of it. Because he transforms, his hands become like cannons. He's got like sort of, his head sort of shrinks down, and he's got like
War of the World, like tentacle things come out the top, and then. Also, half these weapons, like, there's a few that are just like guns. Like, there's a few that are just like a big blast, whatever. But like, there's one he has where it fires at a tank. The tank gets pulled up into like a bubble of energy and then just disintegrates. Like, he has actual super sci-fi tech here.
Oh yeah.
Not just big explosion stuff.
Yeah, and obviously we find out quite quickly that Hogarth's actually okay. He's just unconscious, right? The mum and Dean find him, and they grab him in the car. And he's like, no, we have to get to him. He wakes up again relatively quickly. He wakes up, he's like, no, we have to get to him. We can stop this, right? And there's a whole moment here at one point where, but obviously before, Dean tried to talk to Kent, and obviously that didn't go very far because Kent just lied immediately. But there's a moment here where Kent is actually speaking... Dean's speaking directly to the general, but Kent's also there, and they're both basically arguing in his ear from either side, saying, no, he's docile, the kid's still out there, so on, so on. Like, there's all these reasons why we shouldn't do this, and then Kent's like, no, he's dangerous, he's going to destroy a town, he'll destroy everything.
And that's also where Kent, just before that, he's they see that none of their attacks are doing anything on the Iron Giant, and Kent puts forward, like, we've got a nuke. Out in the bay of this, like,
okay, I just point out, I love the way he phrases it. He doesn't say nuke. He just leans in and goes, the bomb.
The bomb.
We have like, the bomb.
That feels like one of those things that, like, censorship enforced, but it made it even more intimidating.
Yeah, and the general's like, are you crazy? You want to fire that at ourselves. Like, we'll lure it away from the town. So that sets up that the submarine's gearing up to fire this thing, right? That gets that going.
They're tracking his location. They're just going to wait until it gets out of town, and then they'll drop a bomb on it.
But anyway, Hogarth like runs out, gets in front of the giant, and starts yelling up, "You are not a gun. You are who you choose to be." That's him quoting directly what Dean said to him earlier, and you know, starts yelling who he is at him. And of course, it does snap the Iron Giant out of it. You know, the eyes eventually go, and he retransforms. And I think what I liked about part of this, it may have actually been before. Actually, I think it's before he does go super, you know, death mode. There's a moment where it kicks in briefly for a second when he looks like a jet or something like that, and then he like shakes it off immediately and says no. He sort of like fights it actively. I think that actually happened before this, but like it shows that he's kind of learning to like fight it.
It shows that he never wants to actually be that. But also, a moment that I like just after he powers down here is as he powers down, like he can see himself. He comes back to consciousness before the transformation is fully complete again, and he like watches the guns fold away and all that. And as the final gun like folds away, he looks down at Hogarth and is just like distraught. Like he is super upset at whatever just happened. Like it seems like he blacked out, but he knows he did something. And immediately Hogarth just is like, "It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It wasn't you. Like, it's okay." And he just calms the robot down. And I really appreciate that, because it shows just how much this impacted the robot. It wasn't a thing where like he blacked out and he doesn't know anything he did. He knows he did something there, and it really impacts him.
Yeah, it's kind of tragic. You know, I mean, I don't think it's really trying to say anything about this, but it's kind of like almost get into territory where like it's forced into this situation, and like how tragic that is, and like what you could relate that to. Like, there's definitely some little nuggets in there if you want to go down that path.
With the idea of a gun not wanting to be a gun, like this is someone else pulling his trigger. Like he doesn't have any say in this. This is just something that he is forced to go through.
But then you could relate that to like someone being like drafted into the military and like being forced to be a weapon for the state that they don't actually want to be, and you know, all these other things. So so you've got the three-way fight, or two-way fight, but with the general in the middle listening to both sides of it and being like, okay, you're saying it's not a threat, right? The kid's out there, and basically the general comes down on the side of, okay, you know what? I think they're right. I think this thing isn't a threat. I think this is the wise choice is to play this cool at the very least.
It's also as soon as they see Hogarth in the hand, and the general's like, whoa, the kid's alive?
Yeah, you lied here, kid. And he's like, okay, soldiers, arrest this idiot. And then just as he's about to be taken away, he grabs the walkie-talkie from the general, and it's the submarine guys are on the line, and he's like, fire it now, right? So they launch the nuke, and the general's like, you idiot, that thing is going to where the Iron Giant is. And where is it right now? And he looks over his shoulder, is like, right there.
That best line, like that's one of those things that has stuck with me, is this entire little exchange of like Kent trying to weasel out, but it all begins with the line of the general just holding him by the thing being like, where's the giant, Mansley? Like it's such a good line reading. Yeah,
and this is where he shows his real true colors, where he's like, oh, screw this, screw the country, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, well, he tries to put in like, oh, there's a fallout shelter nearby, we can use that and survive. And he's just like, that won't work, you freaking idiot. We're all going to die. Well, that's just how this is going to be.
Yeah, there's even a quiet moment where Dean says that won't work when he's with the mum in Hogarth. And they're like, hey, this is it. This is the end. So I think what I really love about this ending is there's just this quiet moment where it's like everyone in this town's about to die. And it gets quite somber. And the characters are looking sad, and they're basically saying, this is it. It's over. And the Iron Giant's looking down at all of them. And, you know, Hogarth points up and explains, yeah, when that comes down here, that, you know, we're all gone. We're all going to die. And the Iron Giant looks up and he kneels down, gives them the little, like, you know, touch of the side of the head. And
he says, I fix. That's how he starts.
And then he quotes Hogarth from the start of the movie, you know, when the Iron Giant was following him home. He's like, I go, you stay. And then...
No following.
Yeah. And he flies up, just like Superman, and this is again a very Superman style thing, flying up and stopping a nuke. It's literally in the first movie, and he flies up, and we just get this glorious shot of like the collision of the Iron Giant and the missile, and like, you know, above the atmosphere, and the shot of looking at the explosion in the sky, and then the camera coming down to see all the town looking up, and just seeing like, oh, the Iron Giant just sacrificed itself to save all of us.
Bro, I literally have goosebumps right now just talking about it. Like, I love this sequence so much. And I do want to point out the one last thing that happens right before he encounters the bomb. He gets up into space, and you hear the internal monologue of Hogarth saying it again. He says, "You are what you choose to be." And his last word, he closes his eyes and says, "Superman," and then collides with the bomb. God, I love this scene so much. It's such a good sequence. It is,
to be more precise, he goes, Superman. Which I think you have to emphasize. It's this idea of choosing to be that. It's this idea that we've got a movie that's about someone who's inspired by Superman that has actually nothing to do with actual Superman. I really like. Don't get me wrong. If 10 of these popped up, it started to feel weird, and it started to feel like this weird, you know, fanboy or like whatever. Like, it would be really strange. But having this one great example where Superman is being used to try and teach this robot from right or wrong, and the pivotal moment at the end when he gets to choose what he wants to be, he just says he wants to be Superman and saves everyone. It's actually beautifully tragic in all the right ways. It's perfect.
Honest to God, like, admittedly, it has been a long time since I watched the original 70s Superman movies, but I think this is like the best Superman movie we've gotten in like a really, really long time. Like, this is, got that emotional punch to it that I think that it really needs to have. The sense of wonderment, self-sacrifice, this idea of always wanting to do better. This is the iconic Superman movie for me.
I mean, people have been saying for 20 years, some people even say it's the best Superman movie. And that's, you know, that's a debate that you could possibly have, which is insane. It's insane. And that's why for so long, so many people were like, Brad Bird should do a Superman movie, because he kind of did it without actually doing it already. But yeah, it has that wholesome feeling of like this character wanting to be good, and yeah, you've got the added element of he's meant to be a weapon, and that's not necessarily a part of Superman. Although there's definitely some takes on Superman that kind of like have him question, am I here as part of an invasion? Like, you know, before he knows like what's happened to Krypton, like, am I a dangerous thing? Like, you know, is that what I am?
But even then, even if you don't play on the weapon stuff, that idea of the fear of the unknown, like once he shows up on the scene and he says like, yeah, well, I'm an alien, I came with this, you immediately are able to play with all those same ideas as to like, what is he here for? What's his purpose?
Yeah, it's all good. And then obviously set in the 1950s at the height of the Cold War, when any outsider was viewed suspiciously. In fact, at one point in the diner scene when Kent is like, you know, he's going on his rampage about his beliefs and all that, he's like, I don't care if it comes from Russia, Japan, or Canada. And I'm like, Canada? You think Canada sent a killer robot down to get you?
Those Canadians, they've always got something going on.
Just the level of paranoia in that character is funny. It's very funny in the context of the movie, but it's also very true in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, just a little bit of theming that I'm looking into here now. Obviously, the big idea of the Cold War is the Red Scare, and we even see at one point one of the comics in Hogarth's room is like the Red Menace or something like that. Do you think it's intentional that Mansley has red hair, that he is a redhead, and he ends up being like the actual menace all along?
I don't know. I'm dubious on that.
I mean, the only thing that tears that apart is the fact that I think the mom is also technically a redhead, or at least she's more redheaded than Hogarth is. So she didn't do anything wrong, but he's the only other one character who's like definitely redhead.
No, I don't think that. But yeah, the movie skips ahead a bit of time, and there's an Iron Giant statue in the town in loving memory, which Dean was the one who made it, and you know, this is where we get the reveal that him and the mum are a couple now, and you know, this is his best work and all the rest of it. We see that Hogarth's got friends, that this experience has earned him some of that, and there's some confidence that he's been able to connect with other people now.
I mean, I'm pretty sure if you're the kid who was like friends with the giant robot that saved the town, you immediately get cred, no matter what.
Very, very lately. And there's a package that's been sent to Hogarth from the General saying this was the only part that we could retrieve. We found a piece of him. And it's just a screw, basically. It's a big screw. And the end of the movie is inside the bedroom at night. He hears a tapping and a little beeping. And he wakes up and this screw is at the window trying to get out. Implying, and this is the thing, you could have ended the movie with this thing leaving the house and it would be enough to tell you he's putting himself back together, because they established that earlier on in the movie. But we get that final shot and it's in Iceland, which I almost think is a shame, because if you'd have put this in like the Arctic as a sort of like nod to the Fortress of Solitude, I'd have been so into it.
That would have worked.
But it's in Iceland, and you just get these shots of, like, you know, the legs moving, the arms moving towards something, and the camera just goes forward until you eventually get the Iron Giant's head with the blinking light at the top, and the eyes open, and
music swells.
Yeah, you get your ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a very uplifting movie. It's a very touching film because it has all these good, wholesome ideas and messages about connecting someone who's different. Something that seems scary at first is actually friendly and wants to be good and can learn to be good. Also the idea of not being what you were made to be. You know, this idea that someone else told you, hey, this is your purpose in life. Now, whether you want to relate that to being drafted into the military, or you want to relate that to, you're a woman, you have to learn to like give babies and be a housewife. Whatever predisposed thing society says you're supposed to be, or what your family says you're supposed to be, you don't have to be the thing they made you to be. And that core theme is such a big part of this. And I love that it doesn't come from like a... Like, they could have, like, written, like, this is the planet he comes from, and the race that built him, or these, you know, ruthless people. We don't find out a goddamn thing about them, because it does not matter. We don't need that context. We do not.
No. I think that it's really smart that this movie didn't explicitly say what his purpose was, because, yes, there is this larger idea to it that he is, you know, he was built for something. He ended up on Earth, and he has weapons of essentially mass destruction built into him. But as is revealed in this, his programming, whatever it is, acts defensively. It acts as a defense. So obviously this idea that he's supposed to be like a conqueror, he's supposed to be like this genocidal robot, doesn't quite gel with what it actually ends up being, but we never get exact clarification. We never get ideas like, is this something where he's meant to conquer and it's only when people come up to oppose him that he actually fights back? Is this something where, you know, he's able to be a just giant robot who's enjoying the world and this is stuff to just defend himself? We never see how that comes out, but ultimately it comes down to his choice. It comes down to the way that he wants to be. And I also very much appreciate that they show it through the lens of be what you want to be, but there are still morals to strive to. There is still like this ethical standpoint of like, you should want to be a good person, but be what you want to be regardless.
Honestly, I can't really say enough nice things about it. I think it works on its own terms. It works as a throwback to 1950s science fiction. Obviously, it references like those types of movies in the sense of like Hogarth watching that type of thing. There's a Forbidden Planet poster in his room. Like, and obviously it's animated. That didn't happen by accident. They had to choose that and like draw it in like it's there. So you've got that side of it. You've got this sort of ode of like the idea of what it is to be Superman and the idea of making that choice of what you can be when you join a new world. And then you've got the core thing of just the choosing what you want to be in terms of like not being what someone else intended for you to be is such a big part of it. So yeah, all of those things I think come together real well. And I think if you happen to be someone who likes Superman, like actual Superman, I think you get a lot out of this because it understands it in a way that a lot of actual Superman movies don't understand it.
Snyder, what?
Yep. So yeah, I honestly I think that leads us to rating the movie. What are you giving it?
Good Lord. I mean, if I'm being honest, my bouncing is from a 9 to a 9.5. Like, it's fantastic. It's amazing. I cannot speak higher of this film. And again, it's as much as the first part of the movie is development, it's not a lot of big bombastic moments to it. It's very much just a boy and his robot, and they're just learning about life, going about doing things. It's interesting in its own right, but it's the way that it all comes together in that last half hour to just develop the biggest emotional punch that you can possibly imagine. And no matter how many times I see it, I literally watched it last night, and just talking about it again gave me goosebumps. That is the level of emotional impact that makes on me. So all in all, I think I got to go with a 9.5 on this one. And the only reason it's not getting the 10, I think, is because it just, while it is incredible across the entire board, there are just the one or two things that get to me. I think that there are the moments with like Ken Mansley and stuff. Some of the pacing a little bit in the beginning feels a bit shuffled for me, but ultimately by the time you hit the end, none of that matters. And I would flat out say the last 30 minutes of this movie on its own gets like a 10.5. I would break the scale for that last 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think one of the things I didn't say earlier, actually, is that the first time Hogarth and the robot kind of start to bond. So after he's met him again, where he's came looking for him, and he's scared again at first, but ultimately this is where they start learning to speak to each other and whatnot. There's a moment where the Iron Giant's about to walk out of town, and he says, no, they're not ready. And he specifically says that they will be scared and they will see you as a threat. He knows that. Like, Hogarth knows that. He doesn't need to learn that because he assumes that he can tell someone and it goes badly. He just knows that already. And that's actually a little bit sad, that this young kid already knows that people will just react badly to this, and he has to protect him from it. Which, and this idea of him protecting something just like a squirrel is something that he sees as like, oh, this needs help. I'm going to be the one to help him. And it doesn't matter that he's 100 foot tall or however tall he is. So I think that's another special little element to this whole thing. As far as the rating goes, it's so tough because I've been pretty much gushing, and I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10, which sounds like I'm holding back or whatever. But it's just like there's only maybe 20 movies, something around there, that I've given a 10 to. Right. And that's it. I hold that for very much. If I have something a 10 out of 10, it means it's literally in my top 20, top 25 movies of all time. And this isn't quite in there, but it is in my top 100 movies of all time, quite comfortably. So, it is excellent. It's one of, if not maybe, my favorite animated movie that exists. I don't know if there's anything that I hold in a higher regard than this as far as animation goes. Admittedly, I'm not a super... Like, obviously I like some other animated movies, but I'm not someone who loves a ton of them. So, yeah, it does stick out as being really hitting notes that are going to appeal to me. Brad Bird hitting these key morals, these key themes and ideas, and this sense of hope. And I think that's the other thing about the ending that I really love, is that as much as it's tragic that the Iron Giant effectively sacrifices himself to save everyone, it has agency in the moment. It has choice, and it's doing it for a heroic reason. He is doing it for a heroic reason, and I think it's actually very reminiscent of all things, right? All in the Superman parallels, which are very obvious. It's the end of T2. It's the Terminator saying, like, I know now why you cry. You cannot follow me. I have to, I can't self-terminate, kind of thing. I mean, he does self-terminate in this case, but, it's that realization that to save these people that he now cares about, he has to go. And that's what this moment is.
I never watched it, but apparently Ready Player One, Iron Giant makes an appearance in that. And I apparently listed on the trivia, the way that he goes in that is actually just the ending of T2. Like, he falls into a thing of lava, even does the thumbs up on the way down. So
I don't even remember. I've seen it. I don't remember. Did not like Ready Player One. That's fine.
I mean, I think what, for specifically the Iron Giant, it goes back to is it's so relatively pure. It's so like Hollywood has cashed in on everything. Nothing is left alone anymore. And with Ready Player One, that includes Iron Giant, but it's so removed from that point, It's so much a difference of we went a good 20 years with nobody doing anything with Iron Giant, and yet it still held this cultural landmark sort of status to it. It still held this love from the entire generation who grew up with it, and I'm kind of amazed that it's been as untouched as it has.
Yeah, I just checked because I wasn't actually sure if we'd done it on Ace yet. We haven't, so Ready Player One will have to happen at some point, unfortunately, because it's...
No. Anyway.
No, it's definitely going to have to happen, and I really don't like it, which is a shame. But anyway, what was I saying before the Ready Player One? I think the comparison to make to and I love Terminator, right? Terminator 2, especially Terminator 1, though. I probably like Terminator 1 even more than I like this movie, because Terminator 1 is one of my favorites. But the thing I'm getting at here with this being different and very valid, like you said, it's wholesome, it's pure, it's all these things. Like, I love cerebral science fiction, and Terminator at its core is pretty cerebral, and it's very much like sometimes having the hope in a very cold otherwise story is even more meaningful, because it's so cold and scary, and the Terminators are scary, so the idea that one's learned some humanity is actually really uplifting because it's surrounded by such darkness. That's not this. This is, again, closer to a Superman in terms of tone, in terms of, like, okay, it's not this dark, gritty world that we come into, but there is things here that clearly are elements that get in the way, that can corrupt things. You know, there's, like you say, there's just enough realism with the paranoia angle, with the military angle, with the forces that be will not accept this thing and will react in a manner that will lead to something bad. That part feels like there's just enough of realism there to sell the message that the rest of the thing is going to go do. Anyway, I'll stop rambling now. It's a 9 out of 10.
No, it's fine.
It's fantastic.
Hey, it's episode 250.
That's right, it's episode 250. There you go. Yeah. And it's the 25th anniversary of Iron Giant, which we totally intended. It was perfect.
Yep. We did that.
The fact that it's the actual day that it came out when this episode goes out is nuts.
It is.
That is the stars aligning. Anyway.
I tried to time Phantom Menace to be spot on, and we still missed it. But yeah, no, this is spot on.
There was more important things to do than Phantom Menace.
There was.
That's my stat. Also 1999. Yeah, I'll just say Iron Giant, much better movie than Phantom Menace. Heard it here first, folks.
I'm trying to think of a category that would include both of them besides just general sci-fi, but they are completely opposite ends of the spectrum in everything.
Yeah, this has the better kid. This has this has got CGI that's held up.
Less annoying robot.
It's a really weird comparison because obviously this is an animated movie, but still though, in the context of this movie, it's held up really well with its surroundings, whereas in Phantom Menace it's like, ugh.
You decided to go with garbage. Got it.
That Gungan City or the armies at the end, all that stuff, it looks like shit. Anyway, that wraps up the Iron Giant. Phenomenal film. Great to finally have done it. The serendipitous nature of how this has landed on the date that it's landing on and the anniversary and all that, perfect. Just before David gets to his homework, I'll use this time to say next week on the show, we're doing Twilight Zone the movie. Now, the timing of this, there's a couple of reasons for this. There was something else there originally that I've taken away, but the timing of this, the reason why we've put in Twilight Zone the movie next, not that we always need a reason for something, but I am a couple episodes, I'm like 4 episodes away from the end. If I actually, by the time this goes out, I might even be at the end.
You're done? Okay.
Of the original Twilight Zone show, which I review over in Male Fuzz TV. If you ever want to check those out. I actually did the first like 3 and a bit seasons with Tara, and then I went solo after that. But right now, at the time of recording, I've got about 4 or 5 episodes left to record. But by the time this goes out, it'll probably be around when the last episode's going out. And I've started doing the 80s Twilight Zone show as one of the Patreon sponsored shows. So it felt like with the end of the original show, and the movie did come before the 80s show, it felt like a really good time to just slot it into Ace and kind of fit it in there for that lineage, if anyone happens to be also watching those reviews. But if not for you, then certainly for me, because I'm finishing doing that watching and I'm ready for the movie. So
you've done 250 episodes of this show. You can have one for yourself, Pete.
Thank you. So that's coming next week on the show. Look forward to that. Also, of course, I mentioned at the start, you can get bonus content. You can support the show and help keep this podcast, as well as Collector's Cut, Streams After Midnight. All the shows coming over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And over there, you get an extra episode of Screams After Midnight every month. But from me and David, you get 2 monthly shows that are movie reviews. You get Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, some of the best stuff ever made. Real artsy stuff where we get to sit and talk about themes and meanings and all that. And then we also do extra reels where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Sometimes they're so bad they're funny, and that's great. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're torture. But there was actually a free episode of this that went out last month. You can go check out the episode on Solar Crisis for free on YouTube. But there's a monthly episode of that every month on Patreon or via YouTube membership. So go check out if you want to support the show and get some goodies in the process. David does a homework movie every week where he goes back and watches a movie that we did on the show before he joined the show.
Yes.
What was this week's movie, David?
Well, because I am building up to things that happened this decade as well, and also episode 250, I decided I had to go with one of your big ones, one of the tent poles here. I went back and I did Avatar.
Ah, okay. Very nice.
So Way of Water will show up eventually. But no, I saw Avatar in theaters. I did actually go and get the full experience.
First question was going to be, is this a first time watch? But
I can't remember if I did 3D. I know I saw it in theaters, but I can't remember if I did the full 3D experience. Obviously, this time I did not, because 3D is all but dead. In terms of,
there's a dozen people holding onto their 3D TVs from 2013 with their you know, out of my cold dead hands, you'll take my active 3D TV away.
They're trying. Honest to God, I think they should be able to redo the 3D TV as a gaming TV and do the thing where, like, split screen if you're wearing the different glasses. So you have one that's like both left lenses and one that's both right. So that way you can get the full TV, but you can't see your opponent's screen. You know what I'm saying?
That sounds like... I get why you're saying it. I also think it would be so niche and so little used that they're never going to put the R&D into making it work. But
it's all, the R&D is already there. All you got to do is put out glasses of 2 left lenses and 2 rights, and that's it. That's all you need.
Because what happened with TVs is that obviously we had HD TVs, right, full 1080p, and then they started marketing 3D when Avatar came out, because there's a bunch of 3D movies coming out, we can market this. And then by the time 4K was becoming a thing, they said no one cares about 3D, let's just do 4K instead. So now it's just like, I don't know if you can even buy a 4K 3D TV. It might not even exist. I think they just dropped it dead. Anyway,
I'm kind of hoping for a 3D cathode ray, but that's just me. No, Avatar. So even at the time, I enjoyed the movie. I wasn't one of those ones who was like, overhyped, whatever. But I definitely wasn't one of those types that was also like, please let me live on this planet. I need to live on Pandora. It's all I've ever wanted. It's a solid movie. It's very well done. I think the point that I appreciate more nowadays is the pacing of the story, is that it doesn't ever really feel like there's a point that can be cut out for me. Like, everything feels pretty essential towards working to the final point. There's stuff that can be trimmed down and just speeding up the delivery, but despite its massive runtime, I still think that everything is necessary to what they're building to. And you needed to have this runtime in order to tell the story as it's presented. So I will give the movie credit there. Visually, it's great. It's a good looking movie. Even looking back on it now, like 15 years later, it's still a solid looking movie.
Yeah, it only hurts when you actually compare it to Way of Water, because the text got even better. So while the rest of Hollywood's not really pushing the envelope with CG, a lot of them are really just kind of
cost effective.
Yeah. The one thing that makes it look dated is the new Avatar. When you look at that and go, oh shit, yeah, they've advanced a bunch of shit since then.
Right. Yeah, and I mean I appreciate the facial movements, the very subtle looking things. I appreciate the way that they move around. Still looks very realistic in terms of all that. Motion capture wise, this movie's great. I do think there is, just personally for me, I'm unable to get past a lot of the uncanny valley of I recognize that this is a person giving a performance, but it is still an alien. And as such, it just seems unnatural to me. Like it's nothing that the movie itself is doing wrong. It's just my own, in my head, like, I know you're not there because you don't exist, sort of thing. But that's again, nothing to do with the movie. So all in all, it is a very well done movie, even if the plot in the overarching sense, it's just a little bit basic of like, you know, bad capitalism comes in and takes over nature because that's what they always do. I still enjoyed it. I still sat through the movie. I didn't feel like I had to like browse on my phone or anything like that to pass the time. It was always engaging with me. So I'm going to say that this one's probably like an 8.5 for me. I think it's a solid one. It's not up there in like my top tier, but it's very good.
Cool. Actually, when I did it for the show right before Avatar: Way of Water came out, I watched the extended cut for the first time because I'd never seen that. And it's not necessary by any means, and it's not a ton that's added to it, but you do get to see Earth a little bit at the start, which gives a bit more context to how sort of Jake gets recruited into this. You actually kind of see him get told about his brother, which kind of redoes, because some of the dialogue's actually still in the theatrical cut. They just have it as narration. So there's an interesting bit in the extended cut where a part that did have narration doesn't anymore, and it has a bit of a sort of almost colder vibe because of it, which I didn't dislike. It was like, okay, that's actually kind of interesting. It has a different feel because of that. And the main thing that was added was like it was like 2 or 3 scenes that kind of filled in like a little backstory thing with the school that Grace taught at that was like shot at by military, and like something bad happened there. It fleshed out a little bit, and it made it feel like, oh, okay, this feels a bit more villainous what they were already doing here. But I don't think you need them, but I didn't hate the additions though. They were all solid.
Yeah, no, it sounds fine. The only scene that I went out of my way to go find, because it wasn't in the standard theatrical version, was, I swear to God, I remembered the braid sex scene where the 2 main characters have sex and they like link their braids together.
Well, they definitely link their braids together, but I don't know if I'd describe it as much of a sex scene.
No, they don't. But like the linking of the braids together did not happen in theatrical cut at all. Like they just make out a bunch. And I'm like, I swear to God, I remember that being a thing. But it turns out it's only in the extended cut.
I think they imply that's what they do. I don't know if you actually saw it, maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah, they imply it. They imply that sex happened. But like, I remember the intertwining of the stuff.
What I mean is I think they imply that that's part of the sex, is that they intertwine their tail braids.
I think they say that somewhere in there. They say like, oh, did you like do whatever the term they use for like linking or bonding or whatever it is.
You see them link with a bunch of other things, so you're probably mixing the memory of those happening with the love scene. But
once I watched that scene, it still seemed really familiar to me. Maybe I just saw it once it like came out in the extended cut and people were talking about it, but I was surprised that it wasn't in the cut that I had.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So that is David's homework, and like I said, next week we've got Twilight Zone the movie, so we'll see how that fares with us. I've never seen it before. I assume you haven't either?
Nope.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to have to watch through a bunch of your Twilight Zone reviews, because I haven't actually watched... I think I've watched 1 episode of Twilight Zone, like ever, and it was something about like aliens attacking.
The beauty of Twilight Zone is it's a complete anthology. You don't have to go in with a shred of knowledge. You can just go in and enjoy the stories. If anything, it'll be interesting to see your reaction, because I know one of the stories is a remake of an old episode. I don't know if all of them are, but at least one is. So I'll be curious to see different reactions to that based on me coming in with having seen that episode and you having not.
The only thing I know, and I can't even guarantee this is a movie, is William Shatner on the plane. Is that the movie?
No, that's in the show.
All right, never mind. I know nothing.
That story is the one that's remade in the movie, though.
Ah, well, there you go.
With John Lithgow.
All right, sounds good.
So, we'll see that next week. Let us know what you thought of The Iron Giant in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Helps us out a bunch if you do. And, of course, go over to Patreon, support the show, all the stuff that I said earlier. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching science fiction. Thanks for 250 episodes of this nonsense, I guess. And, computer, add salsa.